the committee members back, our witnesses, and also the public who may be following us. A number of the bills today deal with election law, although not all. We will begin with, we're going to start with Senate Bill 70. Hold on one second. Hold on one second, if you would. We're going to start with, I see the chair of finance. We're going to start with Senate Bill 63. Then we will go to Bill 73. Then we will go to Bill 120 and then 88. They will be the order. With that, Chairman Kelly, residency requirement enforcement factors, welcome to EHE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, every Marylander who runs for a seat in the General Assembly or who actually serves as a member is required by Article 3, Section 9 of the Maryland Constitution to be a legal resident of the legislative district in which he or she runs or is elected to serve. Senate Bill 63 is here to provide guidance to candidates and or members who appear to be confused or in non-compliance with Article 3, Section 9 of our Constitution. This bill has no impact on candidates who are temporarily or periodically out of their district or residence because of military service. Senate Bill 63 specifies the following factors which the State Board of Elections or a Maryland court should consider in determining whether the actual residence of each candidate for the General Assembly or each member of the General Assembly is in fact in compliance with the Maryland Constitution. And they are as follows. The address listed on the member's driver's license or other state issued identification card. The street address where the member receives mail unless the address is a post office box. Whether the building claimed as the member's residence is zoned for residential use and complies with any applicable building codes. Whether the member owns, rents, or leases residential property claimed as the member's residence. Whether there is proof that the member has paid for and used utilities at the address claimed by the member as the member's residence. Whether the member receives mail at the address claimed as the member's residence. Whether the school registration of any minor children of the member lists the address claimed as the member's residence. Whether the member's spouse or any other immediate family members reside at the address claimed as the member's residence. Whether the address listed on the member's driver's license or other state-issued IDs would reflect the member's claimed residence. Whether the address claimed as the member's residence is also listed as the member's residence in other employment records. Whether the address claimed as the member's residence is listed on any motor vehicle registration or title held by the member. Whether the address claimed as the member's residence matches the address listed on the member's Maryland and federal tax returns, and whether the member is an active duty member of the military. This list will be helpful when the Council for the General Assembly conducts the required annual review with each member of the General Assembly, as well as being helpful to Maryland courts. I am submitting amendments to add sponsors to the bill. And I think you have that. Senator Joanne Benson, Senator Pamela Battle, Senator Arthur Ellis, and Senator Corey McCray all want to be co-sponsors of this important legislation. I also ask that all members of the Senate Committee on Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs sign on if you're interested in this issue. And I certainly ask for the vote of every member in support of this very much needed legislation. We all look bad when the public thinks that we aren't abiding by the law, and that members who are down at the Board of Elections signing up to run in a district don't feel it's important to live in the district that they represent. I'm sure you feel that way too, and I appreciate you hearing me out, and I hope for a favorable report on Senate Bill 63.
Normally, I would go through all of the proponents and take questions, but I don't want to keep Chairman Kelly from her committee. So if you have questions for the good chairwoman from Finance, why don't we ask them now? I see Senator Simon-Ayer followed by Senator Ellis.
Thank you. It's nice to see you, Senator. Just a question with this. How does this play in with, I believe, this year there's going to be a question on the ballot dealing with residency that changed the Constitution. How does this interact with that?
Whatever is legal in terms of where you're supposed to live and what you have filed to run in, this supports. That's all it really does. If you're running in a district, you ought to live in the district in which you're running. If you are serving in a district, you ought to live in that district. And of course, it does make an exception. It explains that if you're away because you're in the military and you have to do your military service, that is not an applicable part of this.
Okay.
bill.
And then last question, and we probably can talk about that more offline, how that interacts with that constitutional amendment coming up on the ballot. The General Assembly Council, I don't know if that's a current requirement that they have to look at every 188 legislators to see if they're in compliance, or if this just adds 13 more things for them to do that. It seems like an exhaustive list for all the legislators to annually provide this to the legal counsel. How did you envision that working?
Well, legal counsel has to have an individual conference each year with every member of the General Assembly. If there are concerns that someone appears perhaps not to understand the law and their requirement to live in their district, they would go through the list with them as a part of their individual conference, or to make sure, or to ask if we have seen whatever this ends up being in its place in the law, and if they understand the requirements and if they meet them all.
So they don't have to say whether they're in compliance or not. They're just reading these 13 items to the senator or the delegate and saying you're.
I don't know if they have to read it. They could cite the law once it's in the law.
Right, but my point is they don't have to ensure they're doing it. It's just making sure they know of this, right?
Well, they don't have an enforcement body connected with Dia Daly's office, but she's going to come around, or whoever is counsel to the General Assembly, to meet with each of us to make sure we're abiding by our legal requirements in all regards. This is just one more requirement that is already there, but it gives us something to go on. Maybe some people don't understand why this matters or that it matters, and what some of the indicators would be that maybe they have a problem.
Okay.
Let
me just one last little clarification, then I'll stop. You said that they will make sure that they're abiding by this. And so my question is, are they making sure we're abiding by this, or is it just notification to the legislator about? Those are two different things.
Well, I'm not sure even a policeman could make us abide by some things, even when we know what the law is. The point is to make sure that the member who might not be abiding by the law with regard to this issue will not be ignorant of the fact, and will in fact be something that could be addressed in that. Well, in fact, the bill requires that it will be addressed, that this particular requirement in our individual conferences. I'm sure there are others The Attorney General's office has indicated to me that they get inquiries sometime from members of the public who want to know if somebody really is in the district. And I guess the same list is something they could take a look at.
Thank you.
Senator Ellis for the last question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Pinsky, and thank you, Chair Kelly, for your long and distinguished service to the state of Maryland. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you. So we have these 13 additional criteria. Is there like a rubric where, say, if you score like above, say, 70%, you pass and you live in your district, but if you meet under 70% of these criteria, you fail and you're not really residents? Because the reason I say that is I tie that into the IRS. Being a CPA, I'm fully aware of the IRS criteria for determining residency for tax purposes. And it's where you spend the principal amount of your time, like 50% plus 1 day. And so for tax purposes. So I'm just concerned is, do we need a score where we can give these folks, when we look at all these criteria, we can say, hey, you pass or you fail. So it's understood if you pass, by 70%, mean reach over a majority of those, say, criteria, you are ruled in district. If you're below, you're out of district. So it makes it clear. What do you think about?
Well, I think,
those metrics?
Senator, that there's so much ambiguity right now, and there are members here right now that many of us believe do not live in the districts that they're representing. Okay. And the Attorney General has said to me, they don't have the tools they need, but there are people that they suspect are not living in the districts they represent. That's not right. We all know that's not constitutional. And so we're trying to simply help those that need to pinpoint the problem when it exists, to have a set of criteria that are specific to the issue to look at. Right. And then we aren't going to be the police, you and I, and nobody here. If the Attorney General thinks there's a problem, if Dia Daly, the counsel to the General Assembly, thinks there's a problem, I guess the Board of Elections thinks there's a problem. They've got now criteria to look at.
Right.
And we don't have them now.
Yes.
And I guarantee you there are people here now not living in the district that they represent.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's like a speed limit, just setting that speed limit, we know exactly what the speed limit is. If you go over it, you can get a ticket. So I'm concerned about that, but thank you for your answer.
Okay, we can take up more nuanced questions during the voting session. So that's very final short question from Vice Chair Kagan.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. And I'm chatting with our legal counsel. We can talk about it. Senator Kelly, very briefly, and you and I talked about this. I just want to put out, since this is a public hearing, the whole question of how this bill would apply with new districts after redistricting, because there's some incumbents who are moved into another district, and how much time would they get to move into their new district or some other district if they wanted to.
This doesn't say when, but whatever the law is regarding it,
Yes.
these criteria would apply to determine if you're there.
Exactly. Okay. Just something that we might want to think about, colleagues, just to make sure that if we were to, when we look at this bill, just whether we want to include that consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thanks for your
Thank you for joining us, Chairwoman Kelly. Thank you for your bill. I'm sure we'll be seeing on other legislation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
The hearing on SB 63 will now move to SB 73. Senator Lamb. Special election to fill a vacancy in office. Senator Lamb will be followed by Morgan Drayton, Ralph Watkins, and then Terry Cavanaugh. I do not see any, there's one individual, there's one unfavorable. Okay, Senator Lamb, welcome.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. The opportunity to introduce SB 73 for the record, Clarence Lamb Center District 12. This bill is not new to this committee, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. To remind the committee, this bill passed out of the Senate unanimously during the previous 2 sessions without receiving any negative votes in this committee or the Senate floor. The purpose of this bill is to make the process of filling vacancies in the General Assembly more small d democratic by establishing a special election process to include the input of voters without encumbering the state with expensive special elections. Currently, the General Assembly vacancies are filled by gubernatorial appointment from nominees selected by the county central committees of the same political party of the vacant seat. As many of you are aware, there are some jurisdictions where this process can mean that only a handful of well-connected individuals can determine the representation of thousands of voters in that district. Under this bill, vacancies that occur at least 55 days before regular statewide primary or general election filing date would be filled by a special election that would occur in the second year of the term. An appointed person would serve until the special election that would occur during the same timeframes as those of regular statewide elections. If a vacancy occurs after 55 days before the filing deadline, then an individual would be appointed, an individual who had been appointed to the current process would remain in that position for the duration of the term. I won't go into further detail here because I think there's familiarity with this committee and this bill. This bill overall establishes a more democratic process that mitigates party influence on representation, and we believe also saves taxpayer money. This is, I believe, a good government bill founded on bipartisan compromise. I know Senator Huff has been very supportive of this in the past. He's actually agreed to be a co-sponsor again. We just don't have him on there, and hopefully we'll add him through the committee process. I also want to thank my sponsor panel. We have Morgan Drayton from Common Cause and Ralph Watkins from the League of Women Voters. Urge a favorable report again on SB 73, and happy to turn it over to the other members of the panel.
Thank you. And again, we have heard this a couple of years and we passed it. Mr. Drayton.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Ms. Drayton.
No problem. Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Morgan Drayton, Policy and Engagement Manager for Common Cause Maryland. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present testimony in support of SB 73 here this afternoon. So if approved by voters, this legislation would amend the state constitution to require a special election to fill seats vacated by members of the General Assembly in any instance where a vacancy occurs more than 55 days prior to the filing deadline, as Senator Lamb explained. So under current law, in the event of these vacancies, the governor may appoint a replacement who fills that office for the duration of the office's term. And while this may be an adequate solution in some situations, it can lead to legislators filling nearly an entire term without giving the constituents the chance to choose the representative. So SB 73 would correct this by requiring that special elections be held to fill these vacated seats if the vacancy occurs prior to the candidate filing deadline. So as Senator Lamb noted, this passed the Senate with unanimous support during the previous 2 sessions. And we really just believe that this is a straightforward bill that, while not a perfect solution, would definitely be a step towards a more democratic process that gives Maryland citizens a voice in choosing who represents them when these vacancies do occur. So for those reasons, we request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watkins.
Thank you, Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chairman Kagan. We appreciate the invitation to speak. The League of Women Voters strongly supports this legislation because representatives should be chosen by the voters. The compromise that we now have of using party central committees to save time and money is a sort of a stopgap measure, and it is far from ideal when representatives should be chosen by the voters. The bill before you strikes a very prudent compromise. If it's possible to hold a special election at the same time as a regularly scheduled, which would be presidential election, the costs are minimal. So, putting one more person on the ballot one more office on the ballot is not going to be complicated or expensive, and the voters will be able to participate in the election easily. So, and the bill reserves appointment of the interim by the governor to situations where the timing is just not right to put somebody before the voters at a convenient time. So we think this is a very reasonable compromise, and we urge the committee to once again favorably report this bill and move it forward. Thank you again for inviting the league to speak on this.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Cavanaugh, welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and Vice Chair Kagan. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on SB 73 in favor. I'll be brief. Terry Cavanaugh, Executive Director of the SEIU, Maryland and DC State Council. This bill, it broadens our democracy by involving more voters or voters more in selecting their representatives. We like the compromise. The cost is negligible. It's not perfect. We agree with some of the other people on the panel who said, the representatives of the people should be chosen by the people. The U.S. House of Representatives is often called the People's House because no one can serve there without being sent there by the voters. However, we think this is a very reasonable compromise, low cost, and we know there's a number of people who've been appointed, some of them wonderful delegates and senators, but we do have examples where in my own county where we've had a 2-2 tie. So only 4 people voted in an election to send someone to, well, 5 people because it was a tiebreaker, to send someone to represent 130,000 people. So anyway, we appreciate the action that's been taken before, and we hope that this should be the year that it passes and gets before the voters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cavanaugh. There are no further witnesses. We've heard this for 2 consecutive years and passed it over to the House. Hopefully the third time is a charm. That concludes the hearing on Senator Lamb's first bill. Thank you all. We're going to move to Senate Bill 120, licensure requirements for acupuncture. We'll start with Senator Lamb, then we'll be followed by Sherry Black, Mark Levin, and Lynn Vance. There is no one signed up in opposition, so keep that in mind as you're testifying. Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Chairman Pinsky. Good afternoon, members of the committee. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12. So SB 120 is a fairly straightforward corrective bill to amend our current acupuncture licensing process so that these professionals must not only receive a diploma in the accredited program, but also pass a nationally recognized and standardized certification exam in order to become licensed in our state. For those who aren't familiar, acupuncture is a methodology of integrative medicine that involves prickling the skin or tissues with needles to help alleviate pain and treat other various physical, mental, and emotional conditions. Like all other health occupations, the field of acupuncture is always changing. And for this reason, the acupuncturists believe that it is critical that these professionals are subject to an overall objective licensing pathway to ensure that these requirements reflect prevailing national standards and best practices. In our current statute, acupuncturists in Maryland can obtain a license through a pathway accredited by the National Certification Commission on Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, known as NACOM. The national standard bearer in acupuncture is this organization, and in addition to accrediting educational programs and certifying acupuncturists, it's also responsible for developing industry standards that evolve with prevailing best practices. To obtain licensure via this path, prospective acupuncture professionals must first earn a diploma of acupuncture from NACOM or by passing a certification exam that's deemed by the board to be equivalent to that identified by the organization. This essentially means that they can complete an education program but aren't required to do both. This bill modifies the language to require that all licensure applicants sit for the exam as well as acquire a diploma from an accredited program. Without this change, acupuncturists are the only licensed healthcare professionals in the state that aren't required to sit for a national certification exam, which is unusual. And in addition, Maryland is just one of 2 states in the entire country that does not require licensed applicants to pass a nationally standardized certification exam. One other important piece of language I'd like to highlight in this bill is that there is a grandfathering clause that you'll find on page 2. The bill will not enact these new requirements for applicants until May 31st of 2026. This is to help ensure the current students and those who are already in practice will not be disrupted by this legislation if it were to go into effect. So I want to be clear, this legislation is not meant to draw attention to concerns of complacency or malpractice amongst Maryland's acupuncturists. Rather, it's only meant to ensure that licensure requirements in this state reflect the evolving best practices and national standards. I believe that this would help align the state's licensure requirements with the vast majority of other states and ensure that these requirements reflect the ever-evolving standards in this industry. And would like to thank the Board of Acupuncturists for bringing this to our attention and asking that I sponsor this bill. And we do have, as part of our panel, the Vice Chair of the State Board of Acupuncture, Sherry Black, as well as Mark Levin from the Maryland University of Integrative Health, and Lynn Vance from the Maryland Acupuncture Society. So with that, let me turn over to the panel.
Okay, let us go with Ms. Black, followed by Mr. Levin by Ms. Vance.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Black. I am a licensed acupuncturist and a member of the Acupuncture Board. And I'm here today seeking a favorable report on Senate Bill 120. I think Dr. Lamb made it very clear what this legislation does. I'd like to say that this is a change which is long overdue. It will bring us consistent with 48 other states that currently require the NACOM exam for licensure. It will also convey to the public an objective evaluation of every practitioner's basic knowledge of acupuncture. It will demonstrate this board's concern regarding public safety, and it will make reciprocity more available for all acupuncturists licensed in Maryland. Thank you for consideration on behalf of the board and the Department of Health. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 120. Thank you.
That's not my name.
Thank you, Ms. Black. Mr. Levin.
Thank you to the committee. I'm Mark Levin, president of Maryland University of Integrative Health. We are the only acupuncture school in the state of Maryland, and we've been a accredited acupuncture school since the early 80s. And we also are in support of this bill. It makes Maryland uniform with the other states in the country. And one of the key provisions for us as somebody who teaches acupuncturists, the profession here in the state, is that grandfathering clause to essentially not go into effect for folks that are licensed until 2026. And that's really important because the existing students in the pipeline and folks that will be entering the pipeline prior to a change in curriculum entered under a system where they did not need to take the exam. So it's very important to include that grandfathering clause in there. So we're very supportive of this and appreciative for Dr. Lamb of bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Ms. Vance, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, committee members, and Senator Lamb. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to present in favor of SB 120. As the Vice President of External Affairs for Maryland Acupuncture Society, I'm here to represent the licensees in this measure. We have two reasons to be in favor of this bill. From a patient point of view, as mentioned earlier, it will assure that all providers in Maryland have a minimum standard of practice, and that reassures patient confidence in the practice of acupuncture. There's also part of a national effort for acupuncturists to become Medicare providers. And we believe that this action will be a positive step forward for that. There is a national bill for that to happen. Recently, Medicare has approved acupuncture, but acupuncturists are not approved. So we believe that this measure will support that bipartisan national effort to get that covered, and will clear up a lot of confusion on the patient point of view, and it will also give Maryland residents access, Medicare patients access to the most qualified providers of acupuncture. From a provider point of view, healthcare organizations and hospitals typically require NACOM certification for licensure and as a condition of employment. And so this measure will also open up opportunities for licensees to not just open up a shingle and have a practice, but also will help them with employment opportunities. So for those reasons, and so many mentioned before, we would ask the Maryland Acupuncture Society would ask the committee for a favorable report in support of SB 120. Thank you so much.
Okay, seeing no questions, this is pretty straightforward. Thank all of the witnesses for testifying, and that concludes the hearing on the Bill 120. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Move on to Senate Bill 88. That is deadline for selection of Lieutenant Governor. Sponsor is the chairman. What Senate Bill 88 says is the selection for Lieutenant Governor should happen after the primary rather than before the primary. I have suggested this bill for a number of reasons. If in fact the best Lieutenant Governor is someone who has political experience and may in fact have come in second in the primary, they're excluded from running for Lieutenant Governor. And in the course of a campaign, the gubernatorial candidates might find a candidate might find themselves impressed with one of the other candidates who they think would be a good second in command if the governor is unable to continue in the position. So this would allow, within 21 days of the primary, the lieutenant governor to be selected. There's also a second reason. You know, I think, and we've seen during this campaign, if I'm holding an office, senator, county executive, whatever it may be, and a candidate, one of 7 candidates, asks me to be their running mate, do I want to give up my position, run with someone who loses the primary? And I think the answer to that in most cases is no. And some people who potentially could be great lieutenant governor candidates say no, thank you, because it's not a guaranteed thing that they will be in the general election. So the idea of appointing the lieutenant governor after the primary opens up many opportunities. And I think while I appreciate all the people running for lieutenant governor, I think in most cases, voters vote for the gubernatorial candidate. The lieutenant governor candidate can, yes, help raise money, might bring some additional geographic, gender representation. But I think ultimately we want the best number 2 in command. And I think we should allow the gubernatorial candidate as much breadth of selecting who that might be. And I think waiting till after the primary puts it in a better situation. Obviously, this wouldn't take effect for this election, but I think it's a policy I want to put before the committee to consider. And it's not a partisan bill that it helps one party or another. It's just to open up getting the best possible candidates to serve and lead our state. With that, I'll take any questions. There are no other witnesses pro or con, so I put it in front of the committee for your consideration. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quick question. Is this required just a law, or this is a constitutional issue that goes on the ballot?
I believe it's required to go to a constitutional vote. I'd have to check. Yes, it is a constitutional amendment.
Okay. And when would it, if passed, appear on the ballot?
I think it would be this November.
Okay, great.
But it wouldn't have an effect till the subsequent election 4 years away.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Further questions? Further questions? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 88. We will go to Senate Bill 101, Senator Kagan, election law, contested elections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know whether you're going to have me do all four bills, but or not, but let me just start with this one. And for the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and the vice chair of this committee. This is a pretty small but important bill related to recounts. And as you all know, but maybe not everyone watching at home may remember, that we had 4 really close elections in Maryland, more than 4, but Delegate Sarah Love beat her primary opponent by 12 votes. Johnny Olszewski, the Baltimore County executive, was victorious by a margin of just 17 votes countywide. Liz Walsh in Howard County defeated Councilmember John Weinstein by 6 votes, a 0.1% margin, and some of the others. And in my county, David Blair lost to Mark Elrich by 77 votes. So the question is, who should pay, when there should be recounts, and what about publicly financed candidates, which are happening in more and more jurisdictions? And this bill would seek to address all of those. So if the margin between the top 2 candidates is less than 0.25%, which all 4 of the races that I just mentioned would be, were closer than that. So closer than 0.25%, right now it's 0.1%, the county would pay and cover the cost, the staff and the expense of a recount. If the gap is between 0.25 and 5%, so it's close, but it's not microscopically close, then the candidate could choose to pay if they really feel like there might be an opportunity for them to pull out a victory. If the range was more than 5%, it's kind of a waste of time for everyone. And so those would not be permitted. So again, kind of super close, county pays, medium close, candidates could choose to pay, and then not close at all, there would not be a recount. So this would save the resources, save the clarify and all that. So what happens in public finance candidates? We need to make sure for them and for those of us who run with traditional funding, what fundraising rules there should be and disclosure. So we want to make sure that suddenly if candidate Smith is ahead and is likely to win, we want to make sure that there aren't a bunch of special interests that she or he didn't take money from during the campaign. We want to make sure before a swearing in where they're getting money from for a special recount fundraising effort. So this sets up parameters, deadlines, and limitations. And again, for publicly funded campaigns, it also clarifies all that. Kathleen Boucher from Montgomery County's Office of Intergovernmental Relations can speak to this. She's the one who really helped Montgomery County, helped inspire this bill, and Delegate former Chair Ann Kaiser. And I spent a lot of time working on this. I want to close with just a quote, a very brief quote, Mr. Chair. This is from David Blair, who couldn't be with us to testify in person, but the closing bit of his written testimony that's in your folders. Legislation that ensures that no voter is disenfranchised, that each elected official was indeed chosen by the voters, and that protects those who seek to ensure counting accuracy is paramount to our democracy and to the future of our state politics. With that, Mr. Chair, I defer to my very talented witnesses, and thank you all for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you. Committee and people following us, let me remind you, this bill passed last year. It passed the Senate. The bill got hung up on what the threshold should be. So I believe there was a conceptual approval in both the Senate and the House. Is that not correct, Senator Kagan?
It might be, Mr. Chairman, that you're thinking about the curing bill, which is coming up in a little bit. Kathleen, maybe you've got that on the tips of your fingers, but we can look that up while Ms. Boucher
Yeah,
is.
and I could be wrong, but I'm looking at the fiscal note. It says SB 632.
632 is correct.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry, that's the right bill number.
Pass the Senate with amendments and pass the House with amendments. However, difference in the version of the bill passing each chamber not reconciled.
It did pass. It passed last year.
Yes.
But there was something added in
I'm
the
only saying
House.
that conceptually everyone agrees we have to have some thresholds for recounts. The differences were in what their thresholds were. So for the people who are following, we don't have to spend a lot of time convincing people the need to have recount thresholds. With that said, let's go to Ms. Antoine, followed by Ms. Sarang, followed by Kathleen Boucher.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and committee members. I think this is my first time in EHE this session, so it's great to virtually see you all.
Good to see you.
For the record, Joanne Antoine, Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland, and we support SB 101. I will keep my comments very short. This bill, I think it's straightforward for the most part, right? It aims to increase transparency in the cases where recounts are needed. We know that recounts can be really expensive, and especially for our organization, as we've been working to build these public financing programs. And we have jurisdictions like Montgomery County and Howard County that are now using these programs. We want to ensure that those candidates that have opted to run on these small dollars powered by people they seek to represent, that they're not left at a disadvantage if there is a recount needed. So I think the more critical piece for us outside of the forming of these committees, I think is the local authority to really put a process in place for publicly financed candidates. So thank you. Urge a favorable report.
Thank you for making that point, Ms. Antoine. Ms. Sarang.
Thank you, Senator Chair Pinsky and members of the committee. My name is Nancy Soring, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Maryland. Before I begin my testimony, I do want to just point out, I did submit testimony that in SB 15, which we strongly support, as well as SB 239. But because Senator Kagan asked me to testify orally, and she's hard to say no to, I'm here. I will try to make my comments brief. As you know, the League of Women Voters supports all measures that ensure transparency and the public's right to know who is donating money to candidates. While this legislation doesn't address transparency in funding campaigns, it will reveal who is financing recounts for candidates, which these recounts, as has been pointed out, can be very costly. If enacted, the legislation will require the formation of recount committees that with reporting requirements similar to those for a campaign committee. The bill also changes thresholds to request a recount, and I have to say I cannot comment on that because the League has never studied the recount practice in Maryland. However, we all know that our best tool for understanding what the influence of money is on politics and politicians is transparency. So therefore, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Boucher.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Mr. Chairman, yes, it's our understanding from reading this bill and comparing it to last year's bill, it's identical to what the committee and the Senate passed last year. And when I heard you speaking, I was thinking perhaps I should just say, I rest my case, Your Honor, in terms of what you were saying. But I will just say, yes, we're very grateful to Senator Kagan. I should say my name is Kathleen Boucher with Montgomery County Office of Intergovernmental Relations. We're very grateful to Senator Kagan and Delegate Kaiser on the House side for introducing this bill last year and this year, and grateful that it includes amendments that the county requested last year. Your committee adopted the amendments we requested, and they're outlined in our testimony, so I won't do that again here. But we were grateful that you were responsive in that regard. Ms. Antoine spoke to the key issue for the county, which is the enabling authority. The county supports every other part of the bill, but it is very appreciative of the enabling authority there that would allow the county to use public funding to support local county money to support publicly financed candidates in a recount situation. And based on everything you said, Mr. Chairman, and the testimony before me, I would just say, we're grateful for the bill, grateful you passed it last year, and would appreciate your support this year.
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Look, I have a sign up oral testimony from the County Board of Elections, but the position is informational. And when it's signed up as informational, we don't call on people just for information. If there was a question we needed you, we would call on you, but it's a road we don't want to go down of welcoming that. So are there any questions? There are no other witnesses. There is no opposition. I see Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I just want to make sure, Vice Chair Kagan, I just understand it. If you are a candidate and you do not publicly finance, but you met, a thresholds for, a recount, does that mean your option is your own campaign pays for the recount or an outside organization? I just wanted to understand. I know this only applies to publicly financed candidates, but I was trying to understand in the context of the options for all candidates.
It does both, but let me go to the Vice Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for Senator Carrozza for the question. To be clear, this bill applies to any candidate taking money from any source. So it would apply to you and me using regular fundraising methods, as well as a county council candidate in Montgomery County who is using public financing. The latter is not currently addressed in any way. And for us, we're just tightening up and increasing disclosure. So no, an outside source would not pay for my recount committee. That would smell really bad. There'd be no accountability, no transparency. So again, it's kind of three different layers. If it's super duper close, then the county will pay for it just to make sure the county didn't goof up. And our county does a great job, so I'm not accusing anyone of goofing up, but that's the super, super close. The second layer, between 0.25% and 5%, is we have the option. The candidate, presumably the candidate in the second place, in the unfavorable, in the losing position, would ask for the recount and would have to fund the recount. So county government would not be on the hook. We would have to open up a separate bank account, start separate fundraising, and then still disclose. Because as you know, once we disclose in January, there's no disclosure again. And in a non-election year, it's a year before anyone knows where we get our money. So for this, we would want people to be disclosing more frequently and early before the person would be taking office and casting votes that would affect potentially some of the donors. Joanne, I don't know whether you or Nancy or Kathleen would add anything to that.
No, that's fine. One answer is great.
Thank you.
Very clear. Thank you. Further questions on this legislation 101? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on that bill. We will now move to Senate Bill 112, false ballot drop boxes, criminal penalty, against Vice Chair Kagan, who will be followed by Ms. Drayton, Ms. Cohn, and Catherine Berry, and they will be followed by David Nyman. And we have one signed up as unfavorable. Vice Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, for the record, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Senate Bill 112 is prophylactic. We all have seen the amazing value of having drop-off boxes, whether people are voting last second, whether they're worried about the safety or speed of the post office, or whether they just find it easy to stop by City Hall or a local community center or other location that is near their home, work, or errands. There was a 147% increase in the use of mail-in ballots from between 2016 and 2020, and 61% of Marylanders used that. And again, many of them felt much more comfortable using drop-off boxes. In 2 states, this has not happened in Maryland yet, but in California and in Pennsylvania, phony drop boxes were created They were created to look official, but they were not official. And a voter would have no assurance that their ballot put in a phony drop box would be delivered privately and safely and in a timely manner to the Board of Elections to be counted. Now, as you all know, I think, but again, for the benefit of those watching at home, our drop-off boxes are secured. They can withstand the weather. They are put in public locations and they are video monitored 24/7, 365. They cannot be messed with. Ballots are picked up by bipartisan teams with a security person next to them. So there is no chance that anyone messes with a ballot that is put in an authorized drop-off box. Now, most of our drop boxes are authorized by the state or by the county. I can tell you in my own district, the County Board of Elections authorized the city of Rockville to use a drop-off box at City Hall. It had been used 2 years earlier very successfully, and it ended up being, frankly, the very highest used drop-off box location in the entire county. But that was authorized. It was not a state or county box, but it was authorized, and so it was official. So this basically just says, don't make stuff up. It has to be an officially authorized box, and that's where people should use, and it makes it a crime to create something and try to mislead voters. We want our elections to be safe and protected. To be clear, this, like the last bill, is an emergency bill, so we can make sure to have that clear enforcement before this year's primary election and before early voting even starts. With that, Mr. Chairman, I complete my testimony, and I hope that we can move this in an expedited way for lots of time in advance. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. Let's go to Ms. Drayton, Ms. Cohn, Ms. Berry, and Mr. Nyman.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Morgan Drayton, Policy and Engagement Manager for Common Cause Maryland. And thank you again for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 112, prohibiting any individual, organization, or political party from collecting mail-in ballots in any container that is not an officially designated ballot drop box. So as the Senator explained, the importance of the ballot drop box has only risen in recent years. Due to increased strain on the mail-in voting system caused by the pandemic. In 2020, as the Senator said, we saw a meteoric rise in the use of mail-in ballots, and with many opting into new permanent vote-from-home options, that number will likely increase in subsequent elections. And while studies have shown that the expansion of mail-in voting is generally safe, increases voter access, especially for individuals from historically marginalized communities like the elderly, our students, and reduces the likelihood of adversarial interference. I think it's really important that we do all we can to support our local boards by taking proactive steps to deter anyone seeking to interfere with the secure administration of our elections. Taking into consideration, especially the political climate and events of the past few years, we think it's really important that we take steps to ensure voter confidence in our elections remain high. And SB 112 is that step to foster the sense of security voters need to trust in the integrity of our elections and the results. So for those reasons, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cohn, Linda Cohn.
Hi, thank you. I'm Linda Cohn. I'm speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland today in support of Senate Bill 1112, which would prohibit the use of fake drop boxes. As Senator Kagan noted, in 2020, there were some reports of some fake or misleading drop boxes, not in Maryland, but elsewhere. So this is not an abstraction. I voted by mail in 2020 and used a drop box. First time I did both of those things, and I'm not going back. I'm staying with that, but I have to admit, and I'm not fairly informed as a voting citizen on voting procedures, but I have to admit, I went to the drop box and I looked at it multiple times and I walked around it, and I wanted to make extra sure I was at the right container. So I gave it a couple extra glances. But returning a ballot to a drop box is a great option. And it's also great that there are precautions in place to prohibit fake drop boxes from possibly occurring. So we thank Senator Kagan for sponsoring this and urge a favorable review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohn. Mr. Nyman?
For the record, my name is David Naiman. I'm the Secretary of the Montgomery County Board of Elections and testifying today on a few bills, but on this bill, I'm testifying on behalf of our board, which unanimously supports this bill. And on other bills, I will distinguish between my views and the board's. First, I'd like to thank Senator Kagan for her continued leadership in election administration related issues. And today's bills are a good example of that. In this bill's case, Senator Kagan's legislation will prevent bad things from happening in Maryland that previously have happened in Pennsylvania and California. Our board supported this bill unanimously. We don't do much unanimously on our board. As you may know, drop boxes are very, very popular in Montgomery County. As Senator Kagan said, the one in Rockville was the most popular, but voters across the county were so taken with drop boxes that we may have to rethink whether the ballot should be called vote by mail ballots, because a lot of voters didn't use the mail. But they should know when they're casting their ballots with the Board of Elections that that's what they're doing, and that they're not relying on someone else to deliver their ballots, which doesn't always happen the way it should. So we urge a favorable report on this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the proponents? We have one opponent, Ms. Ennis. I'll call on in a moment. Senator Simonaire.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. It's always nice to have your bills in here. You have very thoughtful bills. I know we've put some other bills in to put safeguards in with known flaws in the system. And one of the main arguments is, well, there's no fraud in Maryland, there's no this and that, so we really don't need to do that. So I'm hearing your argument that it's not happening in Maryland, but you hear about it in other states, and being proactive on that. So I'm hoping that we can garner some support from you on some other initiatives that have the same philosophy, that just to put safeguards in. So that's kind of I hope you'll do that. Thank you.
That's an isn't that so, does not require an answer. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Vice Chair, one thing we briefly discussed last year with ballot drop boxes is the fact that there are different colors. They're not a uniform design and color of the drop boxes. Is that something that you'd be willing to look at in this bill, just to have them so they're all uniform, all the same, design or whatever?
Thank you, Senator Gallion. Thank you for the question. I would defer, at least in part, to MAO, the Maryland Association of Election Officials, and Maryland Association of Counties, MACO. But I have to tell you, my initial instinct in the example that I cited, at Rockville City Hall, they used Rockville colors and Rockville logos, and then the county blessed that box. And so it was identified, it was included on the website, it was included in the mailing information, it was included with the ballot that was mailed to voters and all that. So there was no confusion. I'm happy to have the conversation, but these things are expensive. So buying a bunch of new ones or recovering them in some way so they all look alike, I don't know if it's worth the money.
Well, if the concern is you get drop boxes that are not legitimate, one good thing with the ones that are legitimate, whether you're in Western Maryland, Eastern Shore, or any place in between, if they all looked exactly the same, I think that would help. So thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, let's go to the opposition. Ms. Ennis. You need to unmute, ma'am.
There we are. Thank you, Chairman Pinsky and members of the committee for this opportunity to testify today. I'm testifying on behalf of the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, who have 1,480 members across the state. We have concerns about Senate Bill 112 because we don't believe that it actually prohibits ballot harvesting, which is what I think the senator is trying to do with saying that there shouldn't be false ballot drop boxes. The bill talks about unofficial boxes, mail drop boxes, I don't know what unofficial drop boxes are. There's no definition of them, or does it say what their purpose is? Our questions on and concerns on this bill are four. One, can absentee ballots be collected in a container that is not marked to appear like an official ballot box, even a cardboard box or a briefcase? Secondly, I've already asked you, what is the unofficial ballot drop box and who could set it up? And I don't see a definition for it. Third, can a political party's paid staff or volunteer or an out-of-state political action group staff or volunteer collect absentee ballots or absentee ballot applications from voters in their homes or in assisted living facilities or at a meeting and take those ballots to the official ballot drop box and submit them? I think that whether they're using a container that looks like a ballot drop box or they're collecting them by hand or in a box at a meeting, it is the same effect. And that the legislation doesn't seem to address this at all. We want ballots to get to the ballot counting to the official Board of Elections. And we know that in-person voting is the most secure way to vote, but many people, and I think hopefully it'll be fewer people who will use mail-in ballots this coming election because the circumstances and health concerns will be better. But if they're going to use a mail-in ballot, then we need to make sure that the person who is filling out that ballot gets it to the ballot box, and not that we have, as we had in California and Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, people going
Ms. Ennis, you need to wrap up, man.
So that's our concerns, and we would hope that the bill doesn't move forward without addressing those.
Thank you. Senator Freihester. Okay, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 112. We will move on to Senate Bill 158. Also, the Vice Chair. This is Board of Elections Contracts and Invoices Requirements. We will hear from the Vice Chair, then we'll hear from Kevin Canale, Kathleen Boucher, and then Alan Banov, and then David Naiman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. I know none of you guys have ever heard me say that before. So this bill is the third of the 4 emergency bills that I'm bringing for your consideration today. This one, all 4 are important. This one is the one that I think can make the biggest impact, especially for our 24 local jurisdictions. So there are 3 key components to this bill. I'm going to explain each of them, and then my excellent witnesses will be able to take questions, as can I. So first off, for the last 20 years, there has been uncodified language in our law books about a 50-50 split between our state board of elections and our county boards, our counties, in terms of election equipment and cost. The problem is it's not in law. The second problem is that the counties have no vote in the matter. And the third problem is that there's no accountability and transparency. So the state makes up their mind, decides to go on a shopping spree, and then says, hey, counties, you get to pay for half of it. Senator Riley, I see your face here. Hi. Okay. So it would enable our 24 jurisdictions to anticipate, cover their ballots, and cover their budgets, and anticipate and plan for a safe and thorough election. The second thing this does is related to State Board of Elections procurement. Once again, and I'm going to say this is not a hypothetical, this is today. Today, the State Board of Elections brought back to the Board of Public Works, the governor, the state treasurer, and the state comptroller, a $24 million expenditures. Okay, 24 million in the scheme of life, I don't know, that seems like a lot of money to me. The problem is, and this isn't needed until 2024. So this was not an urgent hair on fire thing. The problem is it had never been discussed or voted on by the State Board of Elections. So the second component of this bill is more transparency, more accountability when it comes to procurement. It happened a few years ago when the State Board of Elections staff said, hey, let's get wireless routers. And they put it in the mix of a big package of other stuff, jammed it in the same way that people put the pill that the dog doesn't want to swallow in the midst of a piece of meat or something, and they swallow the meat and they swallow the pill and all good. But to take multi-million dollars of taxpayer funds that the Board of Elections board that was nominated by the governor, that was approved by the General Assembly, by the Senate Executive Nominations, and who have the responsibility of overseeing it, by taking those expenditures, and never having them duly vetted and have them brought to the Board of Public Works, I think it's not transparent, it's not good government, and there's not enough accountability. In this bill, every expenditure would be reported to the Board of Elections, but only those $50,000 and above would they have to vote on. There must be accountability and there must be a public process. As you know, as a result of transparency laws that this committee and the General Assembly has passed, the State Board of Elections live streams their meetings. When it comes to, let's say, cybersecurity, I mean, the good senator from District 9 is quite aware of that. Cybersecurity, for instance, or personnel matters, they would go into executive session and they do that very regularly. But if we're talking about taxpayer money, and I don't care if it's hiring a marketing firm or buying new poll books, we should have public awareness of that. So anything over $50,000 would be debated and voted on by the SBE board members. So the last piece of it is, again, more transparency and accountability for our county boards. What happens now is that SBE sends the local boards of elections a bill and says, you owe me $3.4 million just because I said so. And it's not itemized. And if they don't pay right away, if they ask questions and they don't pay within 30 days, they get assessed an 18% interest fee, which is usurious. I think that's insane. And that is more than in other agencies. So there's no ability for counties to verify accuracy. Oops, you included that thing that our county isn't using. You tried to charge us for that. There is no ability to do that. Counties should not have to write a blank check just because SBE says they should. So again, codifying the 50-50 split, requiring more transparency and accountability on procurement, on significant expenditures, and then lastly, requiring itemization for the counties so they're just not writing blank checks are three really vital issues. So thank you all for your time and attention. This is one of MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties. This is one of their 4 top priority bills for the year. And I know that they are passionate about that. And my friend and colleague, Kevin Canale, will explain this in even more detail. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues.
Mr. Canale.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Nice to be back for the 22 session, although virtually. But Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in strong support of Senate Bill 158. This bill does address a legislative initiative for Maryland's 23 counties and Baltimore City. And this bill is about fairness and certainty. You have my written testimony, and the sponsor did a great job of explaining the bill. I want to focus on something that happened over the interim that exemplifies exactly why this bill is so important. And I'm talking about poll books. They're what we use to check in people at the polls. They're really important, and they need an upgrade. Now, the fiscal note points out that poll books are now a 50-50 cost split between the state and counties, and it says that's due to a recent policy decision. And I want to put that into context. Because current law leaves ambiguity on which election costs are split between the state and county governments, the state decided that counties should pay almost all of the costs for these new poll books, almost $27 million. Now, MACO and the Maryland Association of Election Officials absolutely believe this should be a 50-50 split, and we went to the Board of Public Works to make our case. The Board of Public Works agreed, and the state now agrees to pay 50% of the cost to replace these poll books. Now, that's a great outcome, But the point of this story is that that shouldn't have to happen. We should not have ambiguity in how we fund elections. In simple terms, when it comes to elections, if the state mandates that local boards use particular systems or equipment, and if the state says they're going to oversee the procurement of those systems or equipment, and if the state chooses the vendor to supply those systems or equipment, then the state should have skin in the game and pay 50% of the cost. By clarifying and codifying this 20-year-old precedent and properly defining the equipment and systems that should be eligible for a 50-50 cost split, this bill delivers stability and predictability for state and local budgets. MACO also wants to improve the communications between the State Board of Elections and county governments, especially when the state is making decisions that oblige county funds. We just want county governments to be in the loop so that they can plan accordingly. Senate Bill 158 provides necessary and timely policy changes that balance the shared goals of providing fair, open, and transparent elections, and MACO requests a favorable report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's go to Ms. Boucher, please.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Senator Kagan and Mr. Canale did a great job of speaking to the substance of the bill and the importance of it. And I would just say Montgomery County is very grateful that MACO took this on as an initiative. It has been a long-standing, very troubling issue. And again, very grateful to MACO and to Senator Kagan for bringing this to the committee. I would say that we have personally experienced the negative downsides of decisions that are made by the state board or frankly by the elections administrator herself. I mean, that are made without real debate or disclosure, even at the Board of Elections level. So the county strongly supports this bill, strongly believes that the uncodified language in the 20-year-old bill should be codified, that the 50-50 split should be clear, and appreciate that the bill does this. And the parts of the bill that essentially require that the elections administrator provide material information to the Board of Elections on significant contracts seems so commonsensical that the State Board of Elections would be itself reviewing significant contracts and would itself have all the information it needs to make a good judgment on that in terms of what the contract does, what the source of fundings are, etc. So disclosure to the Board of Elections itself seems very commonsensical, and likewise the Board of Public Works, that if there's a contract that needs to be funded and it goes to the Board of Public Works, again, it just seems basic from a public policy perspective that we would want the Board of Public Works to have the material key information about who's the source of funding for these contracts. And so we appreciate the parts of the bill that do that require appropriate information be disclosed to the Board of Elections and the Board of Public Works.
Boucher, we have to wrap up, ma'am.
Okay, I'll end with the county strongly supporting this bill, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Banov.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan. My name is Alan Banov. That's B-A-N-O-V. I'm a member of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, but I'm testifying here as a private citizen. On Monday, our board voted unanimously to support the sections of this bill, which would amend the election code section 2-111 to provide the 50% of the state's cost of all election-related goods and services mandated by the state board. When in 2001, when the General Assembly authorized the State Board of Elections to oversee the upgrade and standardization of voting systems and election procedures statewide, it required the counties to pay 50% of the state's voting systems cost. That's in Chapter 564, Acts of 2001. It's not codified, however, as Senator Kagan mentioned. In relevant parts, Senate Bill 158 would codify the current law to cover goods and services. By implication, would limit to half the county's share of state-mandated goods and services for elections. This amendment is necessary to give certainty to the counties on the extent of their financial commitments for goods and services related to elections. Local boards generally have no say in the selection of such goods and services. It's like taxation without representation for county election boards to open their limited coffers to pay for goods and services without having a role in deciding what to buy. It is also important for the State Board of Elections to itemize what its billing is for. As Senator Kagan mentioned, when it sends us bills, it attaches interest if we don't pay it fast enough. That's really an abomination, I think. In sum, I encourage the committee to report Senate Bill 158 favorably to the full Senate. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. And finally, are you with us? Still with us, Mr. Naiman?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear my name. Thank you. For the record, my name is David Naiman. I'm the Secretary of the Montgomery County Board of Elections and testifying today on this bill as an individual. As Mr. Banoff said, our board didn't take a position on the bill overall, but did unanimously support the ideas behind the provision on page 5, lines 1 through 3, requiring a 50-50 split between state and local governments of all election-related goods and services that are mandated by the state board. I agree with everything Mr. Canale of MACO said about how we shouldn't have to fight about the 50% for every expenditure. As an individual and not only a lawyer by trade and training, but the son of a lawyer, I'd suggest amending the bill to make it absolutely clear that the 50% is not only a floor, but also a ceiling. I'm concerned that the current language that says that the county shall pay 50% without saying that the state shall pay the other 50% could be interpreted as only a floor. It should be clear that the counties wouldn't be charged more than 50% of these costs. In the ideal world, county boards might want to be consulted on those election-related goods and services mandated by the state board for which we're asked to pay 50%. And I think that there are many instances in which we are consulted. But in any event, we don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate to charge counties more than half the cost of election-related goods and services when we don't have any decision authority on those goods and services. Thank you very much.
Questions for, there's no opposition. Any questions for the witnesses? Seeing none, that completes the hearing. I'm going to slide in Senator Augustine. It's a very quick, simple bill. He's got to chair a committee. We're going to go to 103 if he is here. Lamori, is he with us?
Let me see.
Yes, I am.
I just was.
Yes. Okay, we're going to go to 103, State Board of Examiners for audiologists, hearing aid dispensers, speech language pathologists, and music therapists, revisions. It is just Senator Augustine, followed by Ularimi Dean from the board itself. Very briefly, Senator Augustine, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Pinsky, members of the committee. The Senator Malcolm Augustine here with Senate Bill 103, State Board Examiners, Audiology, Hearing Aid Dispensers, Speech Language Pathology, and Music Therapists revisions. Committee, thank you last year for your work on this on this board. This is simply a cleanup bill. It puts a few additional clarifications and authority around audiology assistance. I consulted with the stakeholders, no concerns raised. I'm joined in support by the executive director of the board, Ms. Dean. Chair Pinsky, members of the committee, I ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 103.
Thank you. Ms. Dean, are you with us and would you like to add anything?
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you, Senator Augustine, for introducing this bill for us as well. And just as he stated, this is simply a cleanup bill for our board. I did want to report that music therapists are active board members and members of our legislative committee as well. And we're happy to have them aboard. We're simply ensuring that we are making sure that our statutes are consistent among our professions as well. And we're also clarifying our reciprocity guidelines for out-of-state licensees to essentially improve and expedite the overall application process for them, which will in turn improve the customer service to the public. So again, SB 103 is simply a cleanup bill that is not controversial in any means. Therefore, we are asking for a favorable report. So thank you again for considering my testimony today.
Thank you, Senator Augustine and Ms. Dean. That concludes the hearing on that bill. We will revert back to the fourth and final Kagan bill on Election Day. Senator Kagan, we are now on Senate Bill 163, ballots, processing and reporting procedures. Please.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Again, Cheryl Kagan, Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, with my fourth and final election bill of the year, and another one that is an emergency bill. So this committee and this body passed the issue of curing last year. We had differences, significant differences in the House. So I'm going to start by refreshing everyone's memory as to what curing is. And again, for those who are watching online, they may be hearing that for the first time. So there are people who send their ballots, who return their ballots without having signed the oath on the envelope. The oath says, yep, this is me, my ballot, and it's not about who they voted for or which races they didn't vote for or which party they're registered in. It's none of that. The envelope is sealed and they have to have signed their oath, attesting, swearing that this ballot is authentic. If the ballot envelope is not cured, which is fixed, which is having a signature added, that ballot will not be counted. People inadvertently forget to sign a lot. So the question is, how much time should our local boards of election have to reach out to their constituents, to contact them and offer them the opportunity to cure their ballot? And what do they do after that? So on this bill, you will hear more different opinions than in the other three. And so I just want to go a little bit slowly on some of this. So let's say, God forbid, you're in the hospital or you are traveling. Currently, there is no situation that allows you to figure out when you can cure. In 2020, Governor Hogan's executive order created a 33-day window to cure their ballots, for folks to cure their ballots. That's really long. Mayo, the Maryland Association of Election Officials, the 24 folks in all of our jurisdictions that help run our elections, coached me in saying, you know what, 18 days is enough. With 18 days, we can get this done. So part of the big bill that I brought last year offered the local boards of elections 18 days. That's what we passed. That meant that if you're out of town or in the hospital or whatever, 18 days, we send you a letter, we call you on the phone, we knock on your door, however it is that we can get your signature, 18 days. The House sent back their version of the bill and said 3 days. And we did not think that that was a conversation, that there wasn't enough common ground. And so the bill died. So this year, Mayo, the Maryland Association of Election Officials, came back and said 8 days. And a lot of us believe that that's reasonable. It's short enough, but long enough for folks to be able to rectify and add a signature. So there are 18 other states that have laws that allow for curing. There are 38 states that allow for pre-processing. So let me go to the next step. After we have a big stack of ballots that have been dropped off through a drop box, delivered to the Board of Elections, the local Board of Elections, mailed in, however it is that they have delivered their ballots, the local Board of Elections are overwhelmed. We're going to once again have great high turnout, we hope. We hope that we live in a democracy where a lot of people want to cast their ballots and express their views. And we are giving them 8 days, but it is going to stop when early voting starts, because they have enough on their hands with managing early voting. We don't want them to have to deal with curing as well. So Mayo has requested that it stop for early voting. It would restart after Election Day. So the curing window would be closed while early voting is going on and on Election Day. The critically important piece, in addition to curing, and I should mention that we're giving people more different ways to cure their ballot. So if they are in Florida on vacation, We're going to want to be able to email them, call them. And there's also, the state board is also going to set up a system to safety, securely, and accurately allow people the option to use a text notification and then go to a secure portal with a unique link and all that in order to cure. So I just want to give you an idea the ways that customer service is going to be available for those who forget to sign their ballot. So once all the ballots are in, we believe that it's in the good interest of our local boards of elections and the press and candidates and the general public to start processing the ballots early. Why is that? Because all of us on election night are dying to find out who won, right? The press wants to know, the candidates want to know, the general public wants to know. But if there are tens of thousands of ballots that can't be started to be processed until election day, it's a mammoth job and there's not enough time. So this bill allows them, after curing, after getting all the ballots, that they will be able to start scanning them, processing them, opening the envelopes of the cured ballots and sending them through the scanner. The one piece, and I should tell you that our wonderful Stacy Goodman, our legal counsel, has drafted an amendment that will say, that will clarify some definitions. And so I'll speak to the amendment in a little bit, but they will be able to open them, scan them through the scanners, but not tabulate or tally or total, whatever word you use in your mind to figure out who's ahead and who's behind. Now, it is current law that elections employees are not allowed to share election results. But there's also law that says thou shalt not murder or litter or sexually harass. And laws are violated every day. And so why tempt people? And there have been accidental and intentional disclosures of premature and partial election results. It's too tempting for a new elections person who's out drinking with some friends who says, ooh, if the county executive doesn't get more people from the up county to start voting, she or he sure is going to lose. Totally inappropriate. So rather than have any temptation or need to rely on the law, we are going to forbid them from pushing that last button to tally the results. Now, you may hear in this hearing that, well, our thumb drives can't accommodate that many ballots. They can only accommodate a smaller number of ballots, and then the scanner is going to be taken out of commission. The answer, and I think you all know the answer, is to get larger thumb drives. We all have phones that now have much more storage space than they used to. It's a really easy solution. We can go to, I would say Radio Shack, but we can't go to Radio Shack anymore, and buy our local boards of elections bigger thumb drives so they can store that material. So just a few more things on this. Another piece, and we have in hearings last year, year before, made very clear to our Board of Elections that we want election results by precinct. And with early voting centers, they're not voting just in their neighborhoods the way they do when they're voting in precincts. It's not that hard. The information is on there. They're given a ballot for their precinct, regardless of where they vote. If I go and vote in Burtonsville, my ballot will still be for Rockville, for precinct 4-3. Actually, I'm in 4-2 now. And that will be clear. So this requires that precinct data. All 5 states, Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, and Washington, that use exclusively vote by mail, every one of them reports data by precinct. That's important for recounts. That's important for fraud detection or errors. It's important for candidates, for challengers, for activists, or for party officials who want to target and know who they're talking to in which precincts and where to spend their time. So let me just speak to the amendment and then I will wrap up, Mr. Chair. So the amendment, currently my bill as drafted, as filed before you, talks about cure not later than 3 days after finding that the ballot needs to be cured. The amendment will say as soon as practicable, and I want to thank Senator Lamb for that, as soon as practicable and not later than 3 business days. So just clarifying that. We add email to one of the ways that this can be cured. And with that, I'm just going to read, because one of the questions you're going to hear is, we think we should be able to tally or total, which is a terrible idea. And we have testimony in your files that do that. I'm going to read a couple of quick sentences from Mary Hall, the Election Center Board of Directors. She's a board member and she's the auditor in Washington State. Quote, "It's critical to have a law to prohibit tabulating preliminary results or even viewing results. This protects election officials from pressure to disclose them. If there were no law, ... I can't even imagine." I'm sorry for the sore throat. So that is from a national expert. And with that, Mr. Chair, colleagues, thank you for your attention to this really important bill, emergency bill. And I know that Jared Damarinus and Mary Wagner from the State Board of Elections are here if we have need expertise, but I also have 3 excellent witnesses. Thank you very much.
We're going to move on with the witnesses. There is no one signed up in opposition. We'll start with Morgan Drayton, Linda Cohn. Then we'll go to Rishi Shah, followed by Catherine Berry. Again, let's try to be additive and just tell us where your organization stands. Thank you. Please begin, Ms. Drayton.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky, members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Morgan Drayton, Policy and Engagement Manager for Common Cause Maryland. And thank you again for the opportunity to testify for the 3rd and final time this afternoon in support of SB 163. So as Senator Kagan explained, the strain on the mail-in voting system has increased due to ongoing concern for public health and safety during COVID. And as we will likely continue to see increases in vote by mail numbers as we move into another critical election year, it's so important that we take measures to support our state and local election boards in the secure administration of those elections. So we are working with Senator Kagan, our bill sponsor, with amendments to the bill that could include pausing the canvass during the early voting period to ease that strain on election judges and volunteers. And establishing a reasonable timeline for notifying voters that their ballot needs to be cured. And based on conversations with our election security experts and on the recommendation of Mayo, we are also recommending to allow for the pre-processing, which, as Senator Kagan explained, opening the envelopes and scanning the ballots to a secure electronic storage for later totaling to ensure that we get prompt and accurate results on election day. So we believe that SB 163 provides common sense steps to improve our mail-in voting process and addresses issues that have long been a challenge for voters, especially those in vulnerable communities like voters with disabilities, students, and the elderly who have relied on this method of voting prior to the pandemic. And so for those reasons, we request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohn.
Thank you. My name is Linda Cohn. I'm here today on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland in support of Senate Bill 163. Among other things, SB 163 would allow ballot processing to start early, which, as you already heard, helps to manage the volume of ballots that come in earlier with more people voting by mail. So it helps manage that burden. It would also allow voters to cure or correct a ballot for a missing signature to ensure their vote isn't lost. They don't lose that vote. It could come about because due to an inadvertent error, or it could be because there's people who are doing voting by mail for the first time. And until people get used to the process, that's a risk that comes with that process. I did look yesterday at National Conference of State Legislatures about curing, And they had a January 2022 report that said there are now 24 states that allow voters to cure a ballot. So strong voter education is important here, no question, but so is having a curing process. I also talked about earlier, I talked about SB 1112 and expressed support for that. We believe that together, SB 163 and 112 help address some of the unfinished business from last session, and we urge strongly support for both and thank Senator Kagan for her continued efforts in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Rishi Shah, please.
Good afternoon to the committee, and thanks to Senator Kagan for sponsoring this bill. My name is Rishi Shah. I'm an advocate with Marilyn Berg here to support SB 163 to improve the administration of our election system, as well as the amendments mentioned by the senator. Just to be brief, ballot curing is essential. As Senator Kagan said, I want to thank you all for passing this piece of this legislation last year. In the 2020 elections, nearly 5,000 people didn't have their ballot counted because they didn't sign their mail-in ballot envelope. Nobody should lose their voice in our democracy because they forgot to sign a piece of paper. So ballot curing is good policy for making sure that everyone's voice is being heard in our political process. And the crucial piece here is that time to pre-process those ballots is critical in order to making ballot curing work. So giving boards of election the time they need to process ballots, that doesn't mean count them, just pre-process them before election day is critical in ensuring that these boards of elections have enough time to cure ballots. And people also have enough time to come in and ensure, sign their ballot envelope and make sure that their voice is heard in the political process. Additionally, as the senator mentioned, it increases public confidence in the electoral process because it speeds up the timeline for results to be certified. Finally, just want to highlight that requiring precinct level reporting is really so smart policy that we're in support of because it increases transparency in our elections and it also strengthens the audit process. So we're also in favor of that bit, and we request a favorable report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. We're going to go to Mr. Canale. Then we'll go to Ms. Berry, then Mr. Naaman, then Mr. Banov, and that will conclude the hearing. Mr. Canale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of Senate Bill 163 with the amendments outlined by the senator. I'll be very brief here. When local boards of elections need help, they call on MACO, and they need help. We're told that unless they get some flexibility here with the ability to start the processing prior to election day, they could run into issues with certifying election results and providing timely results to the community on election night. So we're happy to work with the committee, local election administrators in developing language that works and accomplishes these goals reasonably. But we certainly think that limited discretion in scheduling the mail-in ballot canvass is a sensible solution to serve and correct to community needs, especially amidst the pandemic. So we'd ask for a favorable report with amendments on Senate Bill 163.
Thank you, Mr. Canale. Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Catherine Berry. I am representing the Maryland Association of Election Officials, and I am currently the election director in Carroll County. I would like to thank Senator Kagan for her attention to election matters. I didn't get the opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 112, but Mayo does support that bill. To be as brief as I can, the State Board of Election did implement a ballot tracking system in 2020. We had a lot of success with that. We worked very hard on curing ballots in 2020. So the language here, of course, is to codify that. We will work on ballot curing all the way up to the certification and the final day of canvass, which is 10 days after Election Day. We are in agreement that 8 days prior to early voting is the ideal time to be able to start opening, canvassing the ballots. So opening, separating the ballots, being able to duplicate, discover any curing issues, and then scan the ballots. As far as one other amendment that Mayo would like to request, and this is in part due to the fact that we did this in 2020 in the guidelines, is to be able to tabulate, hit the button
and then have some sort of restriction that unofficial results cannot be released to the public. By completing the canvass process, as we did in previous elections, it helps us at the local level to maintain organization. And then it helps us to prepare for the audit, have an audit trail, and those types of issues. As far as technical components, I would have to defer to the State Board of Elections with regard to, needing more voting machines or what have you, in the event that we would not be able to tabulate. I only wanted to point out one other part of the bill, just for information only. The bill is codifying having results by precinct, and some local boards will be faced with nearly 1,000 ballot styles at early voting centers. So the costs are associated with managing the volume of ballots and the greater amount of election judges that we may need to ensure that at our early voting centers. But I'm hopeful that our committee is willing to come to an agreement on how to help us to move forward, because this is a large component of helping us to be successful in the 2022 election. So I look forward to working with this committee further and the State Board of Elections to
Thank you.
have procedures.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Mr. Naaman, followed by Mr. Banoff.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky. My name is David Naaman. I'm the Secretary of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and I'm testifying as an individual. Our board had a very lengthy discussion of Senate Bill 163 at our meeting on Monday. We are generally in favor of its concept. It's very important to us that we be able to open, process, duplicate, and scan ballots in the time frame that we were talking about, and it's very important to us that no election results shall be published or released prior to the closing of the polls. We had more than 300,000 mail-in ballots in 2020, and it will be a great benefit to everyone involved, everyone who's interested, if we are able to process ballots as much as we can before election day and get results out after, as soon after the election as possible. The number one question I get from people who are not following elections as closely as we are when they find out that I've been on the Board of Elections, I've been on for 10 years, is why are you still working in the middle to the end of November? The election was over. And of course, for us, the election is not over. And it's very important, obviously, that the public have confidence that that our count is going according to the way it should. We also have a potential issue, and we came close to it in past elections, where if we don't get our counting done on time, I believe we have more ballots, in every election than any other county. We can run into, and we almost did, the early December taking of office of people in county office. And if we take a little bit longer, we could have a problem with getting our results in time for the Electoral College vote in the presidential years. So it's very important that we be given that opportunity. I should also add that as an individual, I'm very happy that the bill is including curing. I've been on the board for 10 years. I've seen a lot of eligible voters forget to sign the oath. I think it affects all voters, regardless of political affiliation, age, where they live, et cetera. And it's always been very painful to have to throw out ballots for that reason. Just one more thing. One more thing, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. On the question of tabulation, I think there really is a definitional question that needs to be resolved. I'm very interested in the amendment that Senator Kagan mentioned, because from my perspective, I don't know any election officials who would bow to the pressure of releasing results, that they had preliminary results, but I don't think we should put them in that position. I don't think we should give them that pressure. And so if we can come up with a system that allows us to scan ballots without creating results, I think that will serve everybody's needs.
Thank you, Mr. Naaman.
Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Banov, final speaker on this bill.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and Vice Chair Kagan. I'm still Alan Banov. I'm still a member of the County Board of Elections. Mr. Naaman explained our board's vote on Monday. As he also said, the board expressed the view that the bill defined tabulating to mean directing the scanners to add up the ballots for publication. At present, there is no definition of tabulate in the election code that I could find. I hope that Senator Kagan's amendment will fix that. I agree with our board's vote. I also agree with Mayo. We should be able to tabulate but not publish the results. I explain in my written statement that the current law unduly prevents local boards from processing mailed ballots, even though they became very popular, especially during the pandemic. In 2020, the state board authorized local boards to start counting mailed-in ballots 11 days before the June 2 primary. Similarly, before the presidential election, the state board authorized local boards to start canvassing mailed ballots on October 1, 2020. We in Montgomery County began our canvass on October 6. We began scanning in scanners October 20. Our board was able to scan ballots received before and during early voting without anyone knowing the result until the scanners produced printouts on request. I take it that Senator Kagan's amendment will make this clear that boards can scan ballots, but not to publish them. In my testimony, I explained for you how hundreds of thousands of Montgomery County voters voted by mail or by drop box. Senator Kagan mentioned this increase when discussing Senate Bill 112. My statement also reminds you of all the elaborate steps which local board employees must take to process mailed ballots before tabulating and then publishing them. For these reasons, I support Senate Bill 163 to allow local boards to begin processing absentee ballots at 8 a.m. on the day that's 8 days before the first day of early voting. But the bill should also be amended to prevent local boards to scan 8 days.
Thank you, Mr. Banoff. Thank you. Senator Carosa has a question. Then
thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief because I know I have first responders waiting to testify on my bill, but I just wanted to bring to Vice Chair Kagan's attention. I did hear from one of my local election board members a little concerned about the cost involved with the requirement about the reporting by precincts. And I know that you're going to be working through some other issues on the bill, but I just wanted to, since I did have some local input, share that with you and work with you, offline.
And we'll take that up during a work session as we do a markup on the bill. Seeing no further questions, that completes the testimony on that bill. Now we are moving to Senator Jackson 015, and I'm turning it over to the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Jackson, election law, campaign finance, enforcement. Senator Jackson, welcome to EHE.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Members of the committee, Senator Michael Jackson, representing District 27 on behalf of Senate Bill 15. Senate Bill 15 is a straightforward piece of legislation that does a few significant things. It changes from 3 years to 4 years time to institute the prosecution or the imposition of a civil fine relating to an election law offense. It also fixes a provision of the election law article to provide a more meaningful prosecution of election law violations. While the State Board of Elections is able to handle minor administrative election law violations, they require the assistance of the Office of the Prosecutor for cases involving significant amount of complexity. The State Board of Election makes every attempt to protect those who unknowingly commit violations and allows them to bring their campaign finance accounts into compliance before prosecution. These efforts to bring accounts into compliance, however, often last well over a year, putting the Office of the State Prosecutor at a severe disadvantage in investigating egregious violators and violations and in bringing forward potential charges. If enacted, the added amount of time that this legislation will provide will allow prosecutors to better complete investigations. This would help them to better do their job in holding those accountable who intentionally and maliciously seek to undermine the integrity of the campaign finance laws and related electoral system. The second piece of the bill gives the Office of the State Prosecutor civil enforcement authority over violations of Title 14. Title 14 is a portion of the code that requires business entities who have single contracts of at least $200,000 with the state to report their campaign contributions. Presently, the Office of the State Prosecutor doesn't have this important authority to ensure transparency and to avoid corruption in the state procurement process. With that, Madam Vice Chair, I would ask you and the committee for a favorable report of this legislation. And with your permission, I'd like to bring in my panel reporters.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. Great to have you here. Senator Jackson's lead witness on this will be the wonderful Jared Damarinus, followed by the very wonderful Joanne Antoine. And then we have two more witnesses as well. Mr. Damarinus, as the lead witness, you get up to 5 minutes. Welcome back to EHE.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I just wanted to, for the record, Jared Damarinus, Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance for the Maryland State Board of Elections. I just wanted to say thank you to Senator Jackson for being the lead sponsor on this bill as well and helping me shepherd it through the Senate. This is a bill that the State Board of Elections supports. It was a departmental bill, but the board has voted in support of this. The bill updates the enforcement provisions to campaign finance and other electoral disclosure violations. And as a result of the legislation, the civil penalties and enforcement provisions will be more uniform for all disclosure filers. So basically, if you're in Title 13, which is the political committees, your disclosure laws and the penalties will be similar to the Title 14 filers, which is the person's doing public business, as well as another provision that is in the general provisions article, which says that if one was a state lobbyist and makes $500 more in contributions to a state official, they have to file that same contribution disclosure statement with the state board that a Title 14 filer has to do. So we have tried to make all those provisions for enforcement uniform across the board for penalties, as well as late fees. Additionally, this bill increases the state board's enforcement authority over technical violations against the filers for contribution disclosure statements. So while we're giving the bill also allows the Office of the State Prosecutor to seek civil penalties for late fees and other violations, it increases the state board's enforcement authority to deal with more technical violations of Title 14, which is more in the wheelhouse of the state board rather than the Office of the State Prosecutor, so they can focus on bigger, I would say, violations and possibly criminal violations as well. So I think overall, it just kind of updates and it makes the enforcement provisions necessary for campaign finance and disclosure requirements to ensure that the election and voters have and we can make informed choices at the ballot box. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Damarinus. Let's hear from Joanne Antoine with Common Cause first, and then we'll see. And then we have two other witnesses, then we'll take questions.
It's good afternoon again, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Kagan. For the record, Joanne Antoine with Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of SB 15, which gives both the State Board and the Office of the State Prosecutor greater authority when enforcing our campaign finance laws. You know, I think Senator Jackson and Jared did a great job of walking through the technical pieces of the bill, so I won't do that. I'll just say that as an organization, we understand just how complex our campaign finance laws can be, especially for first-time candidates and treasurers who are trying to navigate tracking donations, expenses, and overall reporting requirements. And even when they're paying great attention to detail, mistakes are made. And I think this is where the State Board of Elections does a great job of working with those individuals to bring their committees into compliance. But we also know that there are bad actors who set out to circumvent our campaign finance laws, and that there needs to be an adequate process in place for holding those individuals accountable. I think extending the statute of limitations to 4 years allows for more thorough investigations, meaning, especially when we look at the state board as they're reviewing thousands of campaign finance reports every cycle, this allows for them to have more time, again, to bring these committees to compliance where they can before reporting them to the state prosecutor. And I'd say overall, the greater penalties hopefully discourages these types of actions and violations from individuals. I'll close off by just saying, the General Assembly has a responsibility to the voters here to ensure that there's greater accountability in our elections in the instances where bad actors are working to undermine our democracy. And we strongly urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. We have two representatives from the Office of the State Prosecutor. I don't know if they are both planning to testify. Is Sarah David in the room?
Yes, and we are. I'll go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, you have 2.5 minutes, Ms. David. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. My name is Sarah David, and I'm Deputy State Prosecutor at the Maryland Office of the State Prosecutor, and we're here in support of SB 15. For those of you who don't know, the Office of the State Prosecutor is an independent office tasked with investigating and prosecuting cases related to political corruption, as well as election law violations throughout the state. I'm joined here by our Senior Assistant State Prosecutor, Lindsey Byrd, who handles our election law violations. Last year, our office investigated over 400 election law violations, most of which are resolved through civil enforcement, but some of which require criminal enforcement. We would like to thank Senator Jackson for bringing this important legislation that highlights two important issues in election law violations that would benefit from this legislation. I'll discuss the statute of limitations issue, and then Ms. Byrd will discuss the changes to Title 14. So our office rarely enforces election law violations through our criminal enforcement power because we reserve that power for cases that reveal true intent to undermine the process. As Ms. Antoine alluded to, our goal is compliance. As every member of this committee knows, as you've all participated in Maryland elections, there are filing requirements for campaign transparency and laws and regulations that exist to contribute to fairness in our election process. And we'd like to thank this committee for its leadership in promoting transparent and fair elections, and believe this is an important next step in the process. Many people with good intentions struggle to meet the requirements, and we work with those individuals in the State Board of Elections to ensure they can come into compliance. However, there are some individuals who commit crimes detected through campaign finance. There are frauds, thefts, and other issues that are uncovered through our partnership with the State Board of Elections and our investigative efforts. These cases come after a significant amount of time has already elapsed, as the State Board of Elections has limited auditors, and our office receives these reports often 1, even 2 or more years after this has already elapsed. Our investigation requires forensic accounting, investigations using advanced technology, and other extensive investigation tactics. The current statute of limitations doesn't allow for some of this impropriety to be detected, and it does allow for some criminal behavior to go uncharged. Candidates in campaigns that misrepresent information or fabricate information related to campaigns undermine the efforts that the overwhelming majority of honest individuals who want to participate in the political process support. An extension of the statute of limitations allows for the detection of true fraud, and we would encourage a favorable report from this committee. Thank you so much.
Oh, did I mute myself? Ms. David, thank you so much for your testimony. Our final witness is Lindsey Byrd from the State Prosecutor's Office. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to let me testify before you today. My name is Lindsey Byrd. I'm a Senior Assistant State Prosecutor at the Office of the State Prosecutor. And as Ms. David mentioned, I handle our election law violations. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 15, and in particular provide some information about how the Title 14 portion of this bill will help us to effectively enforce the election law article. So Title 14 is the provision of the election law article that mandates that business entities that have a single contract of at least $200,000 with the government entity file statements of contributions with the State Board of Elections. This important provision was enacted to encourage transparency and to avoid corruption in the award of state contracts. Title 14 was seemingly meant to mirror Title 13 that handles campaign finance disclosures, which you all, having run for office, are probably familiar. Title 14 currently gives us criminal enforcement power, but doesn't give us the same civil enforcement power that Title 13 has. So for example, in Title 13, when a campaign committee doesn't file a campaign finance report on time, the state board levies late fees against that committee. And if the committee doesn't pay the fees, we have the option of using our civil enforcement power to issue a civil citation to enforce the payment of those fees. In the Title 14 context, if a business entity does not file the required statement of contributions, the State Board of Elections levies late fees against that business. But our office can't do anything in terms of civil enforcement to enforce the payment of those late fees. So nothing happens. and it renders the state board's ability to issue late fees essentially meaningless. And so as a result, many, if not most, of Title 14 violations go unaddressed. Senate Bill 15 would close this loophole, and it would allow Title 14 to work as intended and to foster meaningful compliance and transparency in government contracts, much like campaign finance reports do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Byrd. We're grateful for your testimony. Just for the record, Legal Women Voters submitted favorable testimony as well. And I see that Senator Hester has a question. Senator Hester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who can answer this, but I was looking through the fiscal note, and on page 2 of the fiscal, this is page 3 of the fiscal note, it says that the bill establishes a civil penalty of up to $10,000 for unknowing violations of the law governing disclosure of campaign contributions by person doing public business. And so this looks like it corresponds to section 14-108. And I'm just curious, what are these unknowing violations that have come up recently, and how do you know that they're unknowing?
I can answer that question. So this mirrors, I think 13-604 in Title 13. And when it says unknowing violations, it essentially means it doesn't meet the criminal mens rea requirement. So most violations fall into this category. And so normally what happens when a business doesn't file, the evidence doesn't really speak to why they didn't file. You know, we don't have any insight as to their motivation as to why they didn't file. And most of the time, frankly, it's because they didn't know they had to, it slipped through the cracks. It's this administrative requirement that they weren't aware of. And so that would fall into that category. That would fall into the unknowing category. And that language mirrors the language that's already in Title 13 under campaign finance disclosures.
So I'm trying to figure out why it's such a big kind of punitive charge for an unknowing violation. Like if somebody misses a deadline because they didn't know it was a deadline.
Well, let me just be clear about that $10,000. So the $10,000 is the maximum penalty that could be levied against a committee, but that doesn't mean that that would be levied in every circumstance. There's late fees and penalties. When you say unknowing, it means there's a business that didn't file what they were required to file under the campaign fine or under Title 14. So it's not as if they had no idea that they didn't file it. They're made to be aware that this is a requirement. The state board has a whole show cause process where they send letters. Hey, you haven't filed, you're supposed to have filed. At that point, you know, they have the opportunity to show cause. It's only after all those steps haven't been addressed that it ultimately falls into this civil enforcement provision. So, you know, they use the language unknowing, I think, as a mens rea to distinguish it from the criminal mens rea requirement in the same way that it's done in Title 13. But in reality, it means you didn't meet this requirement. We made you aware of it. You still didn't meet it. And here's where we are. It's actually a softer requirement than the criminal requirement for a civil enforcement perspective. And the $10,000 is the maximum, but not the standard.
And what is it currently?
Mr. Damarinus, you can help us.
I just want to distinguish this. For late fees, that's set because it's in the same method and manner as the political committees. So late fees, the maximum penalty is $1,000, right? Every contract with a state agency right now in there has boilerplate language that requires that the person doing public business register with the State Board of Election and file these reports. So this provision here talks about if they've failed to also register, say, timely, because there's they have to, just like before you engage in campaign finance activity, you have to register and form a political committee. If you engaged in campaign finance activity before you engaged in that activity there, that would be a violation, and that could be unknowingly and moving forward with it. The same can be applied to contracts here and entities that have state contracts. There's boilerplate language in every one of their contracts that says that they have to register with the State Board of Election if the contract has a value over $200,000. We get calls all the time where committees or these entities are calling up and saying, we did not know. And all we can do is basically backdate their registration and saying, okay, now you owe us these late fees for all these reports that you missed. Here, this has also the ability to tack on that you should have actually registered timely on that as well. So there's also internal mechanisms that an entity is supposed to have while doing this. They're supposed to make sure that they email all their directors and officers to make sure that they're in compliance with the contribution laws. Because the entities here, it's a vast disclosure requirement here, so that they have to make sure that and these are all set out in regulations. So this is not something that is these are not policies or anything like that. They're clear. They're in COMAR. They're in the statute. So everything out there is, in full public view for a company that usually has a contract of $200,000 or more, that has either an attorney on record that should know about it or have signed a contract stating that they would comply with all these rules here. So this is not something where the $10,000 is, I would say, an extraordinary fee. It's the same sort of fees that you would face if you failed to comply with it, on top of late fees and violations of late filings. And that's why I want to make the distinction here, that the late fees for failure to report is set. It's $1,000. That's not going to hit the $10,000 mark. These are for other violations that are out there that the company has failed to abide by and complied with.
Thank you for that, Mr. Damaris. It's possible that we may need this need additional information, although we have our legal counsel as well. So thank you. Senator Ellis has a question. Thank you, Senator Hester. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Quick question. Well, actually, two questions. Hopefully they're really quick. So the bill increases the statute of limitations to 4 years. I'm searching, I didn't see what it is now. What is the current statute of limitations now?
It's currently 3 years, Senator.
3 years. Okay, so that's not a huge jump in time. Thank you for that. Also, on page 3 of the bill, line 14, it talks about an individual may not become a candidate for any public or party office in the state or become a treasurer for a campaign finance entity if the individual has failed to pay any civil penalties due under section ... So I thought there was a prohibition already in the statutes for individuals. I'm not sure if it's for candidate or to be sworn in. Could you clarify that? I don't know if.
So it's both. So this was basically one of the things was in 2013 and way back when we basically finally gave the State Board of Election more civil authority to fine candidates and committees for technical violations like authority line and other enumerated offenses. This provision here now is just basically saying, in the past, it was always like if the committee had late fees or if they owed the State Board of Election or was not in compliance or in good standing with the State Board of Election, they should not be a treasurer or a candidate or basically receive their commission for office. So this is just basically saying, well, it keeps with the intent, which is the candidates and treasurers and responsible officers have to be in good standing in order to continue with another committee or to become a candidate or to receive the commission of office. So the citations that I issue, which are for, say, an authority line for $50, if you don't pay that, you shouldn't take office, just like if you didn't file your campaign finance report. So it's just basically making sure that all the violations are now covered for those provisions under Title 13.
Yeah. Okay. So it's late. I don't know if I wasn't following you closely. So you're saying that these prohibitions existed before?
Yes.
But this new language could you review that again? What will this new language?
So the new language is just increasing it from just the late fees for filing a campaign finance report to all violations that the committee has with the State Board of Elections. Because the State Board now has other technical violations. So if you owe the State Board of Elections money for a late fee, which is current law, you can't assume office. If you owe money for, say, an authority line violation, or if you owe money for failing to report all your contributions and expenditures, or if you fail to retain all your records or have a bank account, those violations now currently do not prohibit a candidate from getting the commission. So now, because the intent was you should be in good standing when you seek office and good standing when you get sworn in, this is just kind of moving those provisions that we basically failed to do way back when to the law now. So it's just modernizing it and keeping it with the legislative intent.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. And thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the opportunity to clarify.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, witnesses. I think that this is a bill we're all going to need to understand more about. So I think that legal counsel and SBE will probably help offer some more coaching. But thank you, Senator Jackson, for bringing the legislation. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 15. The next bill, colleagues, is Senate Bill 133, Senator Washington. To State Board for the Certification of Residential Child Care Program Professionals, Membership and Official Seal. Senator Washington, welcome to your own committee.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Colleagues, this is a very straightforward bill, and thank you for this opportunity to introduce this legislation that will further improve the well-being of our children living in Maryland's residential child care programs. SB 133 is very simple. It's simply going to amend the number of board members on the state board for the recertification of residential child care program professionals from 12 to 11. And I will allow my primary testifier here to tell you more about the details of this. There's no opposition to this bill, so I'm going to cede my time to my panel members. The lead proponent for this legislation is Nicole Smith. I believe she's here. She's vice chair of the State Board for Certification of Residential Child Care Programs. Darlene Ham is here to answer any questions you might have. And with that, I urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 133.
Thank you so much, Senator Washington. Nicole Smith, you are the lead witness. Welcome to EHE.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Nicole Smith, and I serve as the secretary for the State Board for the Certification of Residential Program Professionals. I'm also a certified residential child care program administrator and am employed as the executive director for a nonprofit that delivers residential child care services. And I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 133. As a member of the board's licensing and legislative committees, I can attest to the challenge of conducting board business with a current unique makeup for anything that requires a vote. This is due to the even amount of board members that are currently exist, with 6 being appointed by state agencies and 6 being appointed by the governor. Decisions related to administrative or legislative items can be delayed or not occur at all, which has a direct impact on our ability to be able to ensure and oversee the quality of services delivered to families and youth that are accessing residential child care. For example, there are some legislative actions that impact health occupation boards, on which the board is unable to take a position due to the conflict of interest of the 6 state agency members because they have to abstain from voting. A favorable decision on Senate Bill 133, amending the board's membership from 12 to 11, would make it easier for the board to achieve a majority in such situations. We did consider the alternative of adding additional board seat to minimize a voting challenge in lieu of removing the sub-cabinet seat. specifically adding another seat for a residential child and youth care practitioner. But those board positions are very difficult to fill due to the nature of a residential child care practitioner with their role. They provide direct services, so they really have to be on site to do that work. And also they have to be on site to get compensated, so they're not able to participate in board meetings. So it's very challenging to recruit that type of board member. Thank you for consideration of this legislation. And for these reasons, we're requesting a favorable report on this bill.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. I think Senator Washington said that Darlene Ham was available for consultation. Or Ms. Ham, do you want to add any testimony yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Darlene Ham, and I am the Executive Director for the State Board for the Certification of Residential Child Care Program Professionals. And I am here today in support of Senate Bill 133. And just to kind of add some more to the testimony, the board currently consists of 12 members, of which 6 are representatives appointed by the secretaries of various state agencies involved in the licensing and monitoring of residential child care programs. The remaining 6 are appointed by the governor on the advice and consent of the Senate. The bill seeks to amend the composition by removing 1 member, which was originally appointed by the state sub-cabinet, which was the Children's Cabinet, and since being restructured, the Children's Cabinet reassigned a sub-cabinet member position to the Department of Disabilities. And this appointee's position is outside of the area of licensing and monitoring of residential child care services. We currently have 2 members on the board that are appointed by the Secretary of Health representing the Developmental Disability Administration, which is DDA, and Behavioral Health Administration, BHA. And these, both of these agencies are both involved with licensing and funding of residential services to youth and children in residential child care agencies. And these, both of these members are very active in serving the mission of the board, as well as serving the population of children with disability. So amending this bill will not, it will not have any impact on the board's functioning or quorum required to conduct business. Thank you for consideration of this bill, and for this reason, the board is requesting a favorable report on this bill, and I will answer any questions if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ham. I don't see questions from other colleagues, so I am going to take the prerogative to ask 2 questions. I'm guessing either Ms. Ham or Ms. Smith, whoever wants to answer it, and one I have for Senator Washington. The title on the bill refers to the official seal, and on page 4, line 1, the official seal is removed, but I didn't hear anyone talk about that. Could you just explain?
I was going to add that we did not add, not all of us neglected. It was in my notes, but that is something that was passed. I don't know the history of it, but there doesn't seem to be a need to have an official seal for this board.
Okay, I don't know whether we normally have official seals or not, but
yeah,
in the title and in the bill. I have a question, Senator, for you. On page 2 of the bill, line 16, it requires that every board member shall be a United States citizen. And it occurs to me that a lot of childcare providers are people of color, people who are not yet citizens, people for whom English is not their primary language. I wonder whether having that kind of diversity, linguistic and ethnic diversity, or citizenship diversity would make some sense and have better outcomes for this community, especially during COVID. So I just wondered if you'd thought about that, noticed that, or maybe we can talk about that offline.
Again, to be honest, putting in this bill on behalf of the board, so I'm happy. I'm certainly happy to have that conversation, but I would just defer to the executive director, perhaps.
Sure.
Yes.
Ms. Smith, would you like to speak to that, or Ms. Ham?
No, Ms. Ham. I will speak to that if you don't
Yes,
mind.
thank you.
On our application, we don't ask for verification of citizenship. So we do have people of all nationalities and diversity working with youth in these facilities. So that's not a question that we ask on the application.
And to clarify, Ms. Ham, on the application to become a board member?
No, this is for our board, our applicants who are certified as program administrators or residential youth and child care practitioners who also sit on the board. So that's not.
Maybe Senator Washington can chat with you and come back with some suggestions.
Yes, I understand the question, and the observation is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I am concerned, and I think representation could be helpful.
A range of experiences, absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Senator. I see no other questions from colleagues. And seeing that to be the case, Senate Bill 133, the hearing is concluded. Thank you very much, Senator Washington and witnesses.
Thank you.
The next bill is our final bill of the day, I believe, and that is with the good Senator Carrozza from our Eastern Shore, Senate Bill 70, Emergency Medical System Plan Guidelines for Emergency Medical System Law Enforcement Canines. And if it's canines, it must be Simon Air as well. So Senator Carrozza, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, but I think we have one other bill. Senator Simon Air also has a bill. I don't think that's been heard yet.
Okay, I don't have that in my pile, so maybe the chair will be returning.
Okay, so I just wanted to flag that. Well, we're going to jazz it up a little bit and change the topic here because I know we all love our police canines. For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza, representing District 38, which is Maryland's beautiful lower Eastern Shore. And I want to thank the Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, all my colleagues on the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee for allowing me to present and ask for your support for Senate Bill 70. This would allow for law enforcement canines injured in the line of duty to receive emergency medical services by authorized emergency medical services personnel as part of the state's emergency medical systems planning guidelines. I have always believed, and I know I share this with you, Madam Vice Chair, that the best ideas for legislation come from the front lines, especially when it comes to public safety. With SB 70, Worcester County Deputy Sheriff Lieutenant Bethany Ramey, who serves as the canine coordinator for the Worcester County Sheriff's Department, made me aware of the unique role and the dangers that police canines face on a daily basis. And Lemuria, I don't know if we have a couple of those photos to highlight.
Yes, Senator Carrozza, give me 1 second while I pull them up.
And as she pulls these up, seeing these dogs in action, which I have, and hearing their on-the-job stories from their handlers, highlighted for me the various roles of canine law enforcement, ranging from sniffing out and tracking fentanyl and other lethal illegal drugs, to pursuing violent criminals in dangerous neighborhoods, and to even taking a bullet that was meant for an officer. The training, investment, and time invested in Maryland's police canines is significant, and they really are doing their part to keep Maryland and our law enforcement safe. But when a police canine is placed in a life-threatening situation and is injured in the line of duty, there is no clear recourse for emergency medical services to be provided to these hero dogs. You will hear from Sheriff Mike Lewis, Wycomico County Sheriff and President of the Maryland Sheriff's Association. Okay, there we have some pictures here. Thank you. There's Lieutenant Ramey, who you'll hear from in just a little bit. So wanted to highlight our police canines and their handlers. You will hear from Lieutenant Ramey and others that there is confusion and no clear authority nor guidelines when it comes to providing emergency medical services to law enforcement canines injured in the line of duty. More and more states are moving forward with legislation to protect their police canines at the state level, and Maryland's law enforcement canines deserve no less. SB 70 simply would allow for emergency medical services to be provided to police canines injured in the line of duty as long as no humans concurrently need those emergency medical services. It would also allow for the transport of the police canine to a veterinarian facility, and it would grant immunity to those emergency medical services personnel providing those services in good faith. I also want to point out and appreciate the willingness and the leadership of the Ocean City Fire Department, fire and EMS professionals to work closely with the appropriate state agencies, law enforcement, and canine veterinarians to expedite the guidelines and protocols so we can provide our police canines the support and medical care that they have earned and deserve. Senate Bill 70 has a strong cross-section of support, including law enforcement, fire and EMS personnel, veterinarians, and several animal welfare groups, including the Humane Society, the Animal Welfare Institute, and Maryland Boats for Animals. I respectfully ask my colleagues for a favorable report on SB 70 to support and protect our police canines. And I will close my testimony by sharing a powerful video highlighting the life-saving role of our police canines, and then we'll turn it over to Sheriff Mike Lewis. And Lamoria, if you could tee up the video, please.
Yeah, bear with me, Senator Carrozza, that video is pretty large, so just trying to get that up. Hold on.
Well, I think we trimmed it down to about 1 minute and 20 seconds. That was the plan. I know Sheriff Lewis could start and then we could show it if you're having it any issues, but I do know that we significantly trimmed it down to respect everybody's time.
I'm ready whenever you are, Senator.
Lamoria, are you close or should we go ahead?
Yeah, just bear with me. Yeah, on my way out.
I don't have volume.
I have no audio.
Great, here we go. Oops, nope. Memoria, maybe you could rewind it and add audio or make it louder. I don't know about colleagues, but I have almost no audio.
I have no audio.
Okay, so Senator Carrozza, it may be that you need to send us the link or something for us to watch for 1 minute on our own, and we shift.
Okay, we'll do that. And Sheriff Lewis can go ahead. It is a very powerful video, so I would ask that my colleagues take a look at it when we send it to you.
I know that I will be eager to watch it, so I appreciate that. Thank you for creating it. So it doesn't indicate who is your lead witness, but you referenced, so is
Sheriff Mike Lewis, and then Lieutenant Ramey, and then Ryan Whittington.
All right, he is not on this list. I do have Bethany Ramey. I have Robert Phillips.
Robert Phillips could not testify because of the time frame as a first responder. Could Sheriff Lewis start, and then we go to Lieutenant Ramey and then Ryan Whittington for Mr. Phillips?
Moria or Mr. Chair, if you're back.
Yes, I'm with you.
Could Sheriff Lewis start?
No, I just don't know about the committee's policy to have someone who.
So I learned that the chair that Sheriff Lewis was going to testify, so that should be fine.
Okay, thank you, Lamoria. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sheriff Lewis, welcome. You may begin your testimony. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon. I want to thank Mr. Chair and the vice chairs, and certainly Senator Croza for allowing me to be here this afternoon. I've been in law enforcement for 37 years. I'm the current sheriff down in Salisbury in Wycomico County, Maryland. And we have seven canine teams within the Wycomico County Sheriff's Office. As you well know, our profession is very dangerous. In some aspects, our profession is more hazardous than others, especially when it involves our canine teams, that being a deputy sheriff and a four-legged canine trained partner. They're exposed to some of the most dangerous situations by far. By contrast, while SWAT operators are in high-risk situations, SWAT is able to control and slow things down if necessary, while police canine tracking is by far the most dangerous aspect of our profession. Many of these canine operators involve violent tracking of criminals, individuals whose motivations and even their whereabouts are often unknown. Handlers and their four-legged partners could be doing every single thing by the book, but there are still inherent dangers and surprises they face every day. The bottom line is this: when our suspects make up their mind that they're going to take out a police officer or a specially trained police canine, it's very difficult to prevent or eliminate this threat. We do use special equipment every day, and that includes equipping our canines with ballistic body armor, but oftentimes that does not save them. Just 3 weeks ago, on January the 5th, 2022, at 2:45 p.m. in the afternoon, Canine Jedi was stabbed to death while attempting to apprehend a burglary suspect in Seattle, Washington. A resident of the home had dialed 911 to report that a subject was attempting to break into their home with a machete. Responding units encountered the suspect, who fled on foot. Officers pursued him. They cornered him, and the police canine was attempting to assist in the apprehension when the canine was actually stabbed to death. The police officer, who was a canine handler, was stabbed in the face after he watched his dog being stabbed to death. Canine Jedi is but one of 23 American police canine dogs that have died in the line of duty alone in the past 12 months. There are hundreds of police canines that have died throughout our nation and our country. And we've also experienced a major uptick in not only police ambushes and assassinations, but attacks on our police canines at a level that I've never seen in 37 years of law enforcement. Line of duty deaths have risen dramatically. In many cases, these beautiful police canines were shot, they were stabbed, they were beaten to death, and they also suffer heart attacks just like their human partners while they're attempting to apprehend violent suspects. When it comes down to it, the most important equipment on our canine team is the actual canine itself, that beautiful dog that will do anything in the world to protect its handler and to protect the citizens of our respective counties. In Massachusetts in 2021, 2 Braintree, Massachusetts police officers were shot and injured in a shootout that ultimately killed the police canine. Canine Kit was shot and killed. Canine Kit was a 12-year police veteran of the Braintree Police Department and was killed while engaged in an armed suspect. Officials there, after learning that first responders were prohibited from treating that canine at the scene and transporting that police canine, began calling for the passage of law in the state of Massachusetts that would allow emergency personnel to treat and bring police canines to an emergency animal hospital.
Sheriff, Sheriff, I need you to wrap up your testimony, please.
Yes, ma'am. That bill has subsequently passed. It was dubbed Nero's bill because of another police canine that was shot and killed in nearby Yarmouth, Massachusetts. I would encourage you all to please consider Senate Bill 70 and give it a favorable report. And thank you all so much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for your service, your leadership, and your commitment to public safety. Appreciate it. We will take questions at the end of all of these. I just want to, Robert Phillips, again, calling. You said Senator Croza, he's not going to be coming and joining us, right?
Yes, he let me know he's in strong support representing the Maryland State Firemen's Association.
Thank you. So Bethany Ramey from the Worcester County Sheriff's Office is next.
Dear Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Bethany Ramey of the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. I've been a canine handler with the Sheriff's Office for almost 15 years. I served as the canine supervisor during this time and as the canine coordinator. Throughout my career as a canine handler, I've worked 2 dual-purpose canines. Both of these canines serve the citizens of Worcester County in various roles to include law enforcement and search and rescue. Police canines play a vital role in the duties of law enforcement, not so different than that of their human counterparts. They put their lives on the front lines just like police officers. Police canines are expected to utilize their unique skill set to serve the community by looking for missing people, searching for controlled dangerous substances, searching for explosives, locating evidence, and searching buildings and apprehending violent criminal offenders, just to name a few. Canines utilized by law enforcement agencies, just like police officers, are a significant investment of time, training, and cost. Additionally, those canines, like police officers, become ambassadors of their agencies and embed themselves in the communities. While our canine counterparts have an important public safety role in our local communities, they are at a real disadvantage when it comes to lack of emergency medical services if they are injured in the line of duty. Currently, if a canine is placed in a life-threatening situation, the options to care for the canine is limited by current laws. If a citizen of Maryland is exposed to fentanyl or another dangerous substance, EMS can administer life-saving measures. If a citizen of Maryland is critically injured and losing blood, EMS can administer life-saving measures. If it is a law enforcement canine, the only option rests with the canine handler who is minimally trained in EMS care and whose efforts will most likely not assist the canine with life-saving measures. If emergency medical services can be provided to our military canines, then there's no reason why we should not have state protocols for providing emergency medical services to our police canines. These canines protect our first responders on a daily basis and serve our communities. It's our duty to protect them just as we protect our first responders. I strongly urge you to give Senate Bill 70 a favorable report for the safety of our canines.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant. I appreciate your testimony. Colleagues and witnesses, just so you know, there was no opposition to this bill and we still have another bill left. So to the degree that you can be succinct, that would be great.
Senator Kagan, just to confirm on my sign-up sheet, I had Ryan Whittington.
I have lots more witnesses. That's why I'm mentioning that, Senator. So Lisa Radoff, Maryland Votes for Animals. Ms. Radoff, welcome to EHE again.
Good afternoon, Senator Kagan, members of the committee. Lisa Radoff, for the record, Chairman of Maryland Votes for Animals. I'm here in very strong support of SB 70. In 2017, Maryland Votes for Animals worked with then delegate and now Senator Lamb, who is now a member of this committee, to pass the Pets and First Responders Bill, which gives first responders civil immunity when providing emergency medical care to animals. Prior to that bill's passage, it was illegal for anyone who was not a licensed veterinarian to treat an animal for any injury. This actually came as a surprise to first responders, as it was standard practice for firefighters to use oxygen masks to save pets from burning buildings, as terrified families waited anxiously for their beloved dog or cat, not only to emerge with the firefighter, but to receive life-saving emergency care. I will abbreviate my testimony to say that you have heard from law enforcement today about the commitment of these dogs to saving our lives. We need SB 70 to strengthen whatever kind of care that we can get for these dogs. Time is critical with these injuries, so this protection could mean a difference between life and death for these dogs. They risk their lives for us. It's the least that we can do. I would like to thank Senator Carrozza for her sponsorship of SB 70 and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Radoff. We're going to close with Ryan Whittington from the Ocean City Fire Department. I'm just going to read that other people who had signed up include Jennifer Bevan-Dangle with the Humane Society and Kimberly Fullerton with the Maryland State Bar Association Animal Law Division, as well as Josh Howe from Compass Government Relations, representing Maryland Association for Justice. So if Mr. Whittington is available, you may speak, but please keep it brief if you would.
Absolutely, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ryan Whittington, a firefighter, medic, and bomb technician for the Ocean City Fire Department, and we are in support of Senate Bill 70. Our fire department works very closely with law enforcement partners across the state on various emergency scenes. We work with specialty dogs such as bomb, explosive, and also therapy and stress canines. We all know that there are several ways that they can be injured, from being shot to walking on broken glass, or even suffer a severe laceration from being stabbed. Even though these injuries may be rare, they can be significant and even deadly, taking special knowledge to treat these type of injuries. So more and more, your firefighters and paramedics may run into this, and as EMS clinicians, we are not trained or permitted to perform this life-saving skills that may be necessary. With time being of the essence, our EMTs and paramedics can help stabilize the canine in the field before they get to veterinary care. We can save the canine's life. Today, I want you to know that the Ocean City Fire Department recognizes the value and the need for our clinicians to understand how to treat these valuable canines, as they are a significant part of our community. The Ocean City Fire Department is willing to work closely with the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services, MEMS, to help develop the statewide protocols to ensure that our canines can receive treatment and we can save their life. We hope that you vote in favor of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Whittington. Senator Ellis had his hand up earlier. Senator Ellis, do you still have a question, or are you good?
I have a question. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Senator Carrozza, for this very moving bill. And Sheriff Lewis and Officer, I think it's Ramey. I have a question, quick question. Officer Ramey, you are a handler. So is it the practice for you like to work with the canine and take that canine home with you to live with your family? What is the practice?
Yes, sir. For our agency, we do take our animals home with us every day. And once they're retired, they also live with us.
Really? So it's a bond similar to if this was a personal pet. I mean, you take care of that animal. So it must be very tragic to see that canine injured and not authorized to treat. So the key is the emergency medical treatment this bill would authorize. Is it from current EMT or is it to take them to a vet, the nearest vet? What is the protocol that would be authorized with this bill as written?
I think I can respond to that, Senator. Right now, no clear authority for local EMS personnel, for like a Ryan Whittington, to be on the scene to treat a canine that would have been injured in the line of duty. So number one, this bill would clarify that authority and have it part of the state's emergency plan, which I know Senator Kagan, is aware of including that. In addition to that, it would make clear that the transport would be to a veterinarian. So we're trying to make sure that when that dog is injured, that any emergency care can be provided right there on the scene, because the veterinarian's not going to be there, and then put them in those emergency vehicles to transport them to a veterinarian. And then, of course, make sure that they have civil immunity, that they were providing those services in good faith. And the fact that we have, locals that'll work with the state agency on those protocols with these experiences should expedite that process.
Yeah, and with the EMTs currently, would you need like a kind of continuing education training to see how to, for everyone to know how to stabilize that canine? Would you have to, or with
some of those protocols will have to be worked out, and Mr. Whittington, you might have more of a comment since you've been on the scene on what those protocols may look like, but that they would have to be developed.
We have tools that we currently use in our ambulance that we are only permitted by our state protocols to use on a human. However, we do have things such as oxygen masks that we can use on a dog that are typically donated, but things like tourniquets, stop the bleeding, some very basic things that we could use that basically we could take and put into a protocol that should you have a canine injured in the line of duty, this is the treatment protocol. This is how you will follow that to get the animal to the vet for procedures.
Yeah, so with current, I know with the new standards for EMTs, it's very rigorous. So this would not impose another rigor on, especially our volunteers. Charles County, I'm in Southern Maryland, Charles County. Most of our EMTs are volunteers, and there are issues with the new standards. So that, in your opinion, what would be the additional burden on those individuals who have to, say, meet these standards of being prepared and ready to adequately treat our canine partners?
Senator Ellis, I am also a volunteer firefighter medic in Parsonsburg, Maryland, in Wicomico County. So what I would recommend in our department would be that we start this out as a pilot protocol through the state of Maryland. So that way the jurisdictions, Charles County, Wicomico, Worcester, Somerset, Dorchester, could all look at what is developed by MEMS, who dictates our protocols, to say, you know what, these are the steps that you can take. Is this something that you can do in your jurisdiction? If it is, then it would be approved by our medical director to allow them to practice it. And after 1 year, there would be a follow-up to say, did it work for you? Did you have the equipment? Was it a waste of money? What was the value? Were you unable to train your folks? So Maryland protocols allow for what we call pilot program for jurisdictions to sign on board. So if it is too taxing, then your jurisdiction does not have to do it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the answer, and thank you all for your service. I really appreciate you and service to your communities and the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. I have a question for Senator Carozza or for any of her witnesses. I think the bill is well drafted, and I have a question though on page 2, lines 30 through 32. I think it's really smart that we include that the emergency personnel are not allowed to help the dog if there's a person in need of help, which makes sense. But what if, using the example that I think Sheriff Lewis mentioned, what if the dog has been attacked with a machete and the person has like a cut on her finger? I mean, do we need to clarify sort of triage at some point, and whether that needs, and we can talk about it offline, but I just want to flag that whether we need that. And also, has this been done in any other states? Did we learn from any other jurisdictions that have similar legislation?
Thank you for those questions. And number one, I think you're absolutely right. We can work out those protocols to make it absolutely clear, because we wanted to be clear, human life first, but that situation I think we want to build in. And I think Mr. Whittington will have be in that position to work with MIMS on those protocols. And then, yes, we are aware of other states that have moved ahead. Florida, I know, is one, and I think Sheriff Lewis mentioned Massachusetts, and there may be others. So I agree with you. We can learn from the other states on best practices. So I would actually like to see, Madam Vice Chair, to expedite this. I think this is something that, we don't need a pilot project to take, a year or so. That there might be a way to jumpstart this and put some protocols in place. And I would, offer to work with you, with MIMS, with our locals to expedite that protection for our police canines.
Great. Thank you, Senator Carozza. I see no questions from any other colleagues. So that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 7-0. Handing it back to the chair for our final bill of the day.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
37
Okay.
years, a long damn time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the hearing on that bill. We're going to move to the last bill of the day, Senate Bill 239, Senator Simon Ayer, Campaign Finance Protection of Contributor. He will be followed by Jared Damarinus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see you saved the best for last, and I appreciate that. we had this bill last year, so I'm not going to take more than 25 minutes explaining this. But seriously, passing the Senate unanimously last year, it ran out of time in Ways and Means. But encouraging news, I've got the Vice Chair of Ways and Means to cross-file this bill, so I'm very hopeful this will pass this year. It's modeled after the Federal Election Campaign Act, and it basically just protects the privacy of people who donate so they can't use their information for commercial purposes. Worked with the Board of Elections, and I'm just going to hand it over to Jared since I think we're familiar with this bill and ask for a favorable consideration.
Mr. Damarinus.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Simon Ayer, for sponsoring the bill. For the record, Jared Damarinus, Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance for the State Board of Elections. The State Board of Elections supports this legislation. It's been before the committee before, so it's been late. So it's modeled after the federal law, which has been in effect since I think 1976, basically protecting contributor information from commercial solicitations out there. So this is just a protection, a data protection bill that is needed in the state. So with that, I just ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. For the sponsor, Mr. Damarinus. Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on that piece of legislation. Committee, we have 1 or 2 briefings tomorrow. We will have a voting session. Hopefully by now you will have received the voting list in your office. If not, it'll be there in the next hour. Many of them were bills, most of the bills had no opposition. It includes a number of sunset bills as well. We will be voting tomorrow after the briefings and will not be voting on Friday. With that, committee, we are adjourned.